Ladies and gentlemen, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, PVSM, AVSM, Chief of the Air Staff has arrived.
Morning, everyone. Please sit.
A very pleasant morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege and honor for me to welcome the Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Ms. Radhe Tambi, a research associate at CAPS, and I'm delighted to be your host at this seminal event. On behalf of the Center for Aerospace, Power and Strategic Studies, I extend my warmest greetings and sincere salutations to all our guests present here to witness and contribute to the 22nd edition of the Subroto Mukerjee Seminar. The theme of this year's seminar is National Security Imperatives. The year 2026 also happens to be the Silver Jubilee year of CAPS. Over the last 25 years, CAPS has evolved and become a leading think tank on air power and national security. To commemorate our Silver Jubilee, we plan to host a series of events during this year, and this seminar is the first major event being hosted by us. It's a matter of pride for us that we have been continuously conducting this seminar since its inception. We will now begin with the inaugural session. May I request Air Vice Marshal Anil Gulani, Director General CAPS, to kindly deliver the welcome remarks.
Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh, Chief of the Air Staff, former chiefs, veterans, officers from the three services, defense attaches from friendly foreign countries, media representatives, online participants, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. It is my privilege to welcome you all to the 22nd Subroto Mukerjee Seminar, an annual flagship event of the Center for Aerospace, Power and Strategic Studies. And this seminar is a forum that honors the enduring legacy of Air Marshal Subroto Mukerjee, the first Chief of the Air Staff of the Indian Air Force and one of the principal architects of the IAF and air power in the country. Air Marshal Mukerjee was not only a pioneering pilot, he was a visionary leader who understood well ahead of his time the decisive role that air power would play in safeguarding India's sovereignty and shaping its strategic destiny. And the Operation Sindoor last year bears testimony to this fact. His emphasis on professionalism, institutional integrity, indigenization, and intellectual rigor continues to guide the Indian Air Force and India's broader strategic community. Air Marshal Mukerjee brought to the table a blend of operational flying experience and staff acumen, ensuring that strategic decisions were grounded in operational realities. He stressed on the importance of anticipatory force planning, arguing against reactive procurement, an approach that resonates strongly with our defense modernization debates in the country today. He was respected within the political and bureaucratic establishments for his measured advice and strategic clarity, helping shape a healthy civil-military relationship in a newly independent democracy, an essential cog in the wheels of India's progress. And his contributions lay not only in command, but in institution building, embedding professionalism, strategic thinking, and technological orientation into the very DNA of the Indian Air Force. This seminar is therefore much more than just a commemorative event. It is a platform for serious reflection, informed debate, and forward-looking analysis on issues of national security, air and space power, jointness and integration, and most importantly, the evolving character of war. Modern warfare is being reshaped by the compression of time and space, the fusion of technology with strategy, and the blurring of peace and war. Conflicts today are no longer confined to clearly defined battlefields or short, decisive campaigns. Instead, they unfold across a continuum that includes gray zone operations, coercive diplomacy, information warfare, and economic strangulation of what we are witnessing today. Long-range precision strikes, denial of service attacks, militarization of space, and artificial intelligence have altered the character of war, placing a premium on speed, adaptability, and decision superiority. Traditional and conventional forces will not be able to deal with such a war, and thus there is a need for reform. We need to reconfigure and orientate to build credible military capability to fight and win future wars. And for national security establishments, this would mean preparedness, which is not just about force levels or platforms. It is about resilience, integration, and the ability to anticipate and respond to fast-changing and complex threats, evolving threats. This edition of the Subroto Mukerjee Seminar on National Security Imperatives seeks to provide a platform for dialogue and intellectual engagement on the evolving nature of security threats and the opportunities that India has. It aims to bring together policymakers, scholars, practitioners, and industry representatives to deliberate on the critical determinants of India's security in an era of rapid technological transformation and shifting geopolitical alignments. The future of warfare lies in the seamless integration of capabilities across land, air, sea, cyber, and space, and multi-domain operations therefore demand real-time information fusion, jointness in planning and execution, and dominance across the entire spectrum of war. And the first session, therefore, planned today will cover the national security imperatives in multi-domain operations. The post-Cold War unipolar world has given way to an increasingly contested multipolar order, strategic autonomy, great power competition, the rise of middle powers, alliances and partnerships, and multilateralism are all shaping the new world order. The multipolar environment offers both opportunities and risks, demanding a recalibrated approach to foreign policy, diplomacy, and strategic engagement, and that is why the second session is aimed at reimagining national security in a multipolar world. Both the topics are very contemporary and relevant given the way events have been unfolding across the world in the recent past. The chairs and panelists for the seminar are subject matter experts with impeccable credentials, and we are indeed very fortunate to get them all together here and share their valuable insights with us. As we look into the future of air and space power, we do so by standing firmly on the foundations that were laid by Air Marshal Subroto Mukerjee. Remembering him is not just an act of homage, but a reaffirmation of enduring values that must continue to guide India's strategic journey. And before I end, I would just like to reiterate and inform this gathering, as was covered by the MC in the beginning. We are in the silver jubilee year of CAPS, and we look forward to having two major events subsequently, one in collaboration with MP IDSA on the strategic renaissance of air power, and one on the sidelines of the multilateral exercise Tarang Shakti, which the Air Force is planning sometime later this year. With these words, may I now request Air Chief Marshal A.P. Singh to deliver the inaugural address and enlighten us. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Former chiefs, DG caps, distinguished veterans, diplomats, members from academia and aerospace industries, officers from the three services, members of media, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you all, and a very happy 2026. It's a pleasure to join here today on this 22nd Subroto Mukerjee seminar, and the first one of this silver jubilee year of the CAPS. It honors the father of the nation, father of the Air Force, Indian Air Force, Subroto, and a lot has been said about him by DG Caps. I was also reading somewhere that he built the Indian Air Force in an era of, constraints, uncertainty, and limited resources. So when I look at myself today, 25th chief after him, if I can call, I don't think much has changed. So, but when we talk about era of constraints and limited resources of that time, I think that was very, very different, very different. And the kind of foresight that that individual had that put us on the right path, because they say well begun is half done. So I think that is where the strength lies, that he put us in the right path, and we've been growing from strength to strength. Of course, when I look at my all other predecessors also, I think I'm very much better placed than any one of them, because resource crunch continues to get the resources continue to get better and better. Marshal Mukerjee, as DG Caps has just brought out, he understood something very fundamental about air power well before it became fashionable to quote it like that. That its air power is not just merely aircraft and weapons and platforms, but about thinking innovatively and utilizing the resources to one's advantage and think ahead of the adversary. And that is something that we need to continue remembering and following. And befitting that, I think this seminar, which is to honor that individual, is looking, it's covering a topic which is well beyond these platforms and weapons and all, and looking at national security as a whole. These seminars, they are good for where year after year, we or months after months, when we talk about other seminars also, we bring together the operational expertise, the academic rigor, and the strategic foresight together. And I congratulate CAPS for this, CAPS, and in particular, I mean to say, in particular, all the former DGs and the current one for, for their personal involvement in all these, which ensure success of such events that are academically oriented. In a profession that is often consumed by the urgency of the present, or if I can put it colloquially, which is consumed in firefighting, as we call it in Indian Air Force. I think such initiatives by CAPS or all the other organizations, they keep us intellectually prepared for the future. The theme for this year's seminar is the national security imperatives. These are the core necessities that the nation must secure to ensure the nation's survival and sovereignty. And some of the major ones that we all understand are the security of borders or internal security, that means managing your borders or internal law and order situations. Self-sufficiency in food, water, maintaining stable economic growth, and avoiding critical dependency on other nations, securing a reliable supply of energy sources, and securing ideology, the security of thought, the culture of a nation. So these are some of the things, of course, these days, all these get connected to some other securities of securing the digital spectrum, the EW spectrum, the cyber and the space, which becomes very important. Now, how does the nation do it? Nation uses its power, which if you say comprehensive national power, it comprises of many things that we have learned, we have been reading about, we have been practicing. Whether it is your, the whole idea is that use that comprehensive national power in a manner so as to impose your will over the other nation, or other way around, if you are one of those who believes in harmony and living together, maybe make sure that no other nation is able to impose their will on you against your wishes. So that is where this national power comes in, and if I can again talk about some of the components of this national power, I think first and foremost is your geography, your size, your location, what kind of topography you have. Of Of course, that will also decide on what kind of neighbors you land up having. Apart from that, natural resources, minerals, fuel, energy resources that you have, which are, again, given to you by nature, and how do you harness them? How do you take them out? How much effort you put in towards that? The demography, a large population which is very skilled, very motivated, it's a positive. But having a population which is uneducated, poor, not able to make two ends meet, it becomes a liability. Economic growth and industrial development and capacity, it's very important part of the national park. Along with that, of course, the infrastructure, the transportation, communication, all these infrastructure matter. Technology, how to use whatever resources you have to the best of your, to your betterment is very important. How much you invest in R&D, what kind of R&D infrastructure you have, what kind of talent you have in the nation. And of course, last but not the least that I could think of was military. The size, the platforms that you have, the training that you do. And along with these are the intangibles, the leadership, not just in military, but as a national leadership. How well you are able to manage or mobilize your people, how well are you able to influence their thinking and get them all together. Ideology, the set of beliefs that we grow up with. How good are they? How strong are they? How convincing are they? And these ideology, they provide us this, having a common ideology provides us having unity at home and to be able to project our thinking abroad. Morale, like I said, leadership controls your morale. So how determined are you in pursuit of the national goals? One of the most, important intangible that I can think of is the soft power, the diplomacy. How you use your, various elements to influence people outside your country. How you project the right image of the nation. How you bring them to understand you better, to understand your requirements better. And all this, all elements of national power that I've listed, they all are interrelated. They don't work independently. We all have to put them all together. But historically, what we have seen and what we are seeing in the recent past, what is happening currently in the world, we must understand that military power stands as the ultimate arbiter of the national power. Anybody who can be very economically sound but cannot be secure. We have the example of our own country. We plus China, I think we control almost 60% of the world GDP at one time. But that didn't stop us from getting captured and colonized. So any one of these powers are very important. But finally, what is required is a very robust military. Because if you don't have a robust military, you can be subjugated by anybody. Venezuela, Iraq is one of the examples, some of the examples that we have. And what does military power do? It will protect your economic activities. It will give you the freedom. It will secure the technological infrastructure that you have. And also, it will give credibility to your diplomacy, the soft power that I talked about. If I can put together all strategies, all instruments of national power will take you nowhere if you do not have a strong military power. So that becomes an absolute necessity. And, it is the military power which is very important, but along with that, it is the will to use that military power which becomes even more important. So you have to show that will, because unless you have the military power, unless you have the will to use it, you can keep showing restraint, but that restraint will be seen as a weakness. It's only when you're strong enough and you show restraint that it is seen as capability. That there's that कबीर का दोहा है कि क्षमा शोभती उस भुजंग को जिसके पास गरल हो उसका क्या जो दंतहीन विषरहित विनीत सरल हो. So we need to remember that unless we are a strong military power, unless we have shown our will to use it, we will be subject to subjugation sometime or the other. It is not good enough to be a strong economy only. It is not good enough to be technologically very advanced only, unless you know what to do with it in terms of military. So, whether it is, when I talk about military power, now when we look at what is happening around the world and what has happened in India, which part of that military power which has come in handy or which has delivered what was required to be delivered? I think I don't have to name it. It is air power. And it becomes very important that we focus our attention towards this part of the military in case we want to be, a force to be reckoned with. Whether it is, getting people out of conflict zone, like we did it in Sudan, or whether it is, giving a blow to the terrorist infrastructure and their perpetrators, or whether it is attacking multiple bases in Pakistan in a matter of few hours to send a signal that enough is enough and bring them to their knees. It was air power which did the trick, and that has to be remembered. This year for Indian Air Force has been a seminal year. I mean to say 2025 I'm talking about, the last year. And we have achieved what even DG alluded to, and I'm not going to cover it. I think we all understand. I must tell you that I've been telling my people that let's not rest in past glory. Let's look at it, look forward from here onwards. The world is getting increasingly chaotic, and we can't be sure of what is going to happen ahead. So at least we can be sure of things that we can focus on, where we can help, where we can do something about. And we must focus on that, what we can influence. And right now, creating a strong military, like I said, especially the Air Force, becomes a necessity. And it will ensure that we are, this is a requirement if we have to take a flight towards Vikasit Bharat of 2047. And that is where our focus should be. And I feel we have the mindset, we have the human capital, but somewhere we are lacking is technology, and that can be caught up with in due course of time. Unfortunately, our requirements do get requirements and timelines get affected by what is happening in our neighborhood, because we need to be prepared for our adversary. So whatever happens there, we need to be a little on the reactive mode at times. So while supporting all the R&D efforts that are going on towards indigenization, towards being Atmanirbhar, while supporting that, we need to take some decisions to, to invest in some other maybe Make in India programs. That means while design and develop in India is continuing, we need to take some quick decisions to get some Make in India program into our country, so that we get the technology and we get our, products, the weapons and the platform that we need in near future. We need to catch up with the technology. So to catch up with the next generation, we need to join hands with some other country, because maybe we can do it alone, but it will take longer. And world over, it is happening. We are all into strategic partnerships. This is the right time to get into a strategic partnership for development of next generation platforms and weapons. something on the lines of what decision we have taken for the engine, the engine for the future aircraft. So drones, another area which we have been talking about. They're transitioning from their simple support secondary roles to very complex roles now. This is one area which is where importance of the drones and relevance of drones is increasing by the day, whether it is drones or MUMTI or swarms, or whether it's counter drone systems, or whether it is having a UCAV kind of a drone which will enter an area of high risk. So this is one field which is rapidly growing, and our focus should remain towards acquiring this capability as early as possible. And again, whether it is in terms of developing or having a parallel path where we are developing some and you are buying some for the time being and making some in India. So I think more will be talked about. We are going to release a book on drones today, so I think that book will contain a lot about it. So if I can conclude, I can say that while we honor the legacy of Air Marshal Subroto Mukerjee, we must remember that the true strength of India's national security architecture lies not only in what we possess, but how thoughtfully we prepare to use it and prepare for what lies ahead. And like I said, since military is a major part of our national power, it is important how we equip ourselves and how we, rather more importantly, how we utilize what we have. So as far as equipping is concerned, the immediate, we need to manage our immediate requirements while we are looking at our, options to become fully Atmanirbhar by 2047. The immediate requirements have to be managed now. And as far as how to utilize what we have or what we are acquiring is concerned, certain things that need attention are, coordination between services where we have similar assets, and not only just services, other agencies also. Drones is one example. So that duplication of effort in equipping and training is reduced, and also make sure, I think this was very beautifully brought out by DG also, that what Air Marshal Subroto Mukerjee understood and said, that we must be, we must have anticipatory force planning. So we need to make sure that our capability development is in consonance with the roles and tasks that are assigned to us now and what are expected in future. We should not be taking a jump into the future and thinking about roles which are not there for next 10 to 15 years for us, and wasting our effort, money, energy towards that. We must realize what we need today and in the next 10 years, and must focus more on that as far as immediate requirements are concerned. And we must understand that every service has their core competency, and it is best that we tackle our primary roles and leverage the core competencies of services and other agencies. That is the real essence of multi-domain operations. So, very relevant topics, two topics that have been chosen for the two sessions today, and I wish this seminar a success and look forward to having insights then that will emerge after the discussion. My compliments once again to CAPS for organizing this, and thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your inspiring words. We shall now move into the second segment of the inaugural session, which comprises of a book release titled Drones Redefined, The Impact of Emerging Technologies on UAS Warfare, edited by AVM Anil Golani and Professor Dr. D.K. Pandey. For the book release, May I request the guests on the stage to kindly come forward. I also request Air Vice Marshal Ashish Bohra, ADG CAPS, Dr. D.K. Pandey, and Mr. Sanjeev Thakur from Knowledge World to kindly come up. I also request all the contributors to come up on the stage for the book release. A brief about the book. The book is an attempt by CAPS to provide a structured and forward-looking analysis of unmanned aerial systems warfare, progressing from foundational transformations to disruptive future trajectories. Section 1, Cruising High, maps the evolution of UAS from remotely piloted platforms to increasingly autonomous combat systems, while Section 2, titled Evolution to the Next Level, focuses on capability enhancement and strategic escalation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause. Thank you, sir. With this, we come to conclude the inaugural session. May I request all of you to kindly join us for the high tea in the foyer and operatives in multi-domain operations. The chair for this session is Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, PVSM, AVSM, VM, former Chief of the Air Staff. Air Marshal V.R. Chaudhary was commissioned into the fighter stream of the Indian Air Force on December 29, 1982. A Category A flying instructor, he had an extensive experience in training and operational flying. He has been the Deputy Chief and Vice Chief of the Air Staff before taking over as the 27th Chief of the Air Staff on September 30th, 2021, the position he held till September 30, 2024. The panelists of this session are Air Marshal George Thomas, AVSM, VM, Director General, Air Operations. The Air Marshal is a fighter pilot, qualified flying instructor, and an experimental test pilot with extensive flying experience on various fighter aircrafts. Vice Admiral A.N. Pramod, AVSM, YSM, is Director General, Naval Operations. The Vice Admiral is a communication and electronics warfare specialist and also a Category A Sea King Operations Officer with extensive command and staff experience over a career spanning 3.5 decades. Major General Sandeep S. Sharda, YSM, SM, VSM, is the Additional Director General, Strategic Communications, Indian Army. He was commissioned into the Dogra Regiment. The General Officer has varied operational and staff experience in his career spanning over 3 decades. As ADG Strategic Communication, he has been involved in the planning and execution of Operation Sindoor. I now request Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary to kindly come up on the stage along with our other panelists. I now request the chair to kindly take over the session. Over to you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think the selection of the topic and the theme for this 22nd edition of Subroto Mukerjee Memorial Lecture could not have been more apt. And the first session will be on the imperatives in multi-domain operations. So now this word multi-domain operations usually conjures up images of, rockets, missiles, aircraft, ships, submarines, all flying together, causing devastating damage on the adversary. But what we need to understand is that this is something not very new, though the lexicon may be new, but multi-domain operations have always existed in some form or the other over the past years. Let's go back over 100 years. During the First World War, the combined arms warfare was the concept that was tried out, tested, and led to the victory by the Allies. Post the Vietnam conflict, the air-land battle concept, which also in some form involved multiple domains, was postulated, and this led to the complete lopsided victory of the US forces over Iraq. But what we need to understand is what are the driving factors behind these multi-domain or multiple domain operations. Number one was availability of mature technology and trained manpower in that technology, and plethora of equipment available that was being aided by this kind of a technology. So these are a few imperatives that I think are necessary before we even discuss how to formulate concepts on multi-domain operations. Now, when I use this word concept, please remember that concept means thinking about the future, about how you're conceptualizing what warfare is going to be like. It is not doctrine. We have to be very clear about that. Unless you distill insights from ongoing conflicts, unless you distill information from exercises, from simulations, you will never be able to formulate a comprehensive doctrine on multi-domain operations. We need to articulate a very clear theory of success. We need to have very clear ideas on what adversary are we talking about. We cannot really generalize that multi-domain operations will take care of all our adversaries. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. Sometimes I think when we hear about these terms, multi-domain, it's usually, I would use a loose term, a mishmash of ideas, of visions, of images that conjure up of how the physical domains and the virtual domains are going to coexist and how they're going to, like I said, annihilate the adversary. For some others, it is more of a whole of a nation or whole of a government approach to warfare. But here we need to, tread with caution. I'll come to this a little later. One thing I just want to get out of the way is the misconception that MD or multi-domain operations are joint operations by another name. Nothing can be further from the truth in this. People quote the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, which was enacted by the US Senate. Please remember that that act was meant to coordinate the headquarters, to coordinate the higher echelons of the militaries to work together. It was an organizational concept. It was not a joint maneuver strategy. Therein lies the primary difference between what a joint headquarters were meant for and what multi-domain operations are going to be in the future. Here, again, there is a misconception among the services themselves that if you operate in somebody else's domain or you're utilizing the additive capabilities of somebody else's domain, you are conducting multi-domain operations. That again is patently false. Unfortunately, these are the mindsets that we need to correct, and I hope that seminars such as this will be able to achieve that. What needs to be understood is that to differentiate between joint operations and multi-domain operations. Joint operations primarily will be, service components operating together at a higher level of, at a higher tactical level of operations. Whereas multi-domain operations will involve coordination not only between the components, the military components, but also intra-agency cooperation, cooperation with civilian counterparts. The whole of the nation, I'll use this again, whole of the nation, basically to create an overarching maneuver strategy that that has a converging effect across all the domains, physical or virtual. Joint planning, on one hand, has always been focused on a limited geographical area. When we talk about even the theater commands and, examples are quoted about how effective they have been, please remember that they have been effective in a particular geographical area. Now, we cannot expect multi-domain operations to be limited by geography. In this case, what we are talking about, this concept of multi-domain operations is going to surpass all geographical limitations. They will involve multiple agencies, maybe collaborative efforts with other friendly nations in order to achieve the national strategic goals. The question is, are we really prepared to accept this magnitude of change? Are we prepared to accept the complexities that are involved in conducting multi-domain operations today? The growth of computational power has resulted in exponential rise in the capabilities of our weapon systems, of our platforms, of our cyber capabilities, and so on. And the consequence of all this need to be clearly understood. The ongoing wars, like I said, when we need to distill information, two prime examples are, of course, the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What it has demonstrated is the unforeseen capability of the physical domains of land, air, and maritime operations through the use of unmanned vehicles, unmanned drone boards, anti-armor, precision fire, and so on. All that has been on an unprecedented scale. More importantly, it has highlighted the importance of the virtual domains of electronic warfare, of how access to the electronic warfare domain and denial of that has changed the contours of the conflict from time to time. The most salient lesson, however, is that what happens when opposing forces do not have the space to maneuver without catastrophic results. The second ongoing conflict is what is happening in the Middle East with the Israel's wars. Now, this is again, it's a study in contrast. On one hand, you had the Iranian facilities being struck by the Israeli forces in June last year. This, in a way, can be truly defined as multi-domain because you had thousands of images. Somewhere it's said 12,000 images were being transmitted live to fighter aircraft and to command and control centers to be able to pinpoint the targets. On the other hand, there were over 100 agents on the ground who were helping the human angle to once again identify and earmark targets. Of course, at the same time, the cyber units had infiltrated the Iranian military. They had, could be able to track the position of the military hierarchy and so on. So in a way, it was, a classic example of how multi-domain operations would take place. But contrast it with what happened in that same country a few years ago. They had a second Yom Kippur moment. The most surveilled area in the world, where all the components, the Army, Navy, Air Force, cyber, space, everybody is working to surveil that area. But yet, they had a surprise attack by in Gaza. So, once again, you need to draw the correct lessons. And people in uniform need to study this very carefully to see what are the best lessons that you can adopt for your own service. The real concerns, of course, will be whether, like I said, this multi-domain operations is a concept. Whether it will actually fructify or will it mature into a fully functional warfighting means is what we need to think about. And seminars such as this, I'm sure, will generate the vision required to distill clarity from complexity and to be able to give us insights into what the future beholds. The end state, of course, is to provide a clear analytical framework to understand the environment, to identify the problems, and to develop a cognitive map for execution of multi-domain operations. Today, we are fortunate to have on this panel 3 senior officers from the 3 services, we have Air Marshal George Thomas, the DG Air Ops, who will be speaking on the integration across domains. Then Vice Admiral Pramod will be speaking on the autonomous weapon systems, ML, AI, multi-domain enablers in future war. And Major General Sharda will speak on the cognitive warfare in multi-domain operations. So it's we have a wide spectrum of topics being discussed by this panel. Let me lay out some rules for the speakers today. We'll take about 12 to 15 minutes at the top for you to present your portion. Thereafter, I'll keep the house open for you to ask questions to each other if you have any. And then I will throw the session open to the audience to ask questions. So if that's okay with you, let's start with Air Marshal Thomas.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege to be here and to address such a qualified and distinguished audience and to be part of such a qualified panel. The topic for my talk today is as shown on the slide. I will cover the talk under the heads as shown. My intent would be to put across the practitioner's perspective, and while there is much spoken about, as the chair brought out in his introductory remarks, and there are a lot of buzzwords floating around about MDO, I will intend to show that it's nothing new, the concept and some of the applications. I will, however, focus on the considerations which we need to keep in mind and touch upon some of the challenges before I conclude. So coming to the NATO definition, as you see on the slide, I think the two main ideas which stand out are convergence and speed. It's no longer sufficient to act sequentially. Effects must converge across domains, and they must do faster than the adversary can respond. So I have put together a definition of MDO as shown, which says the synergistic application of multiple domains in warfighting at the operational and tactical level to achieve desired effects is basically what MDO is about. It is thus about integrating the domains rather than services, which is a mistake we must not make, as the chair highlighted initially. There is really nothing new in MDO, and while the chair took us back about 100 years, I'll take you back about 1,000 years. And we see that in the 10th century, the Cholas demonstrated an early Indian model of MDO. While integrating maritime power, they integrated land forces, information, and economic coercion to project power far beyond the Indian subcontinent. Naval dominance of the seas enabled sustained land campaigns overseas, and controls of the SLOC then disrupted adversary trade, maintained their own supply chains, and the political messaging at that time reinforced their military success. The core MDO insight here, which we can take away, is simultaneous control of domains across space and time, and that principle remains valid even today. You move a little forward, I take you to the Pacific campaign in World War II. Again, a classic illustration of MDO in its time. The island hopping strategy of the US integrated maritime, air, land, and also brought in information warfare and the logistics angle to this. By bypassing Japanese strongholds, the Allies created multiple dilemmas for Japan, and naval and air superiority paralyzed the enemy decision-making, thereby imposing their will on the adversary. Logistics came to the forefront here as a primary enabler of MDO. The third example I will take from history is, of course, the 1971 war. It remains one of India's finest examples of MDO. Air superiority over East Pakistan, rapid land thrust towards Dhaka, maritime strikes by INS Vikrant, vertical envelopment across the Meghna and the Padma rivers were executed in near simultaneity. Information and psychological operations also played a major part here. The decisive strike on the governor's house directly contributed to political collapse, and this near simultaneous application of domains created strategic shock, leading to a rapid and decisive outcome. So let us see what we mean by cross-domain integration. This is a very well familiar set of actors on this slide. So on the left, you have the traditional physical domains, land, maritime, air. The emerging recognized domains are cyber and space. But the point I want to take is that information ties it all together. Without information connect, you will not achieve the synchronization which you need, and that synchronization will create the effect. Integration or jointness, as the chair brought out, merely enhances your capability, but true MDO is done by this synchronization. Few critical components of MDO I've shown you on this slide. It's a fairly busy slide, but the flow is fairly clear. Information dominance is fed by the joint ISR network. This then goes into compressing our decision cycle, staying within the OODA loop of the adversary, and the key tenets to be seen in the loop are cross-domain application, synergy, and most importantly, tempo. MDO is always a battle for time, and time, when you apply the effect, is what causes the shock. If you see the considerations, I will briefly cover these as shown on the slide. On the right are the classical domains which we know. For MDO to succeed, you need to integrate the domains. This has to commence from the conceptualization phase and continue all the way through doctrine, through SOPs, through tactics, all the way till the execution phase is completed. We will have a quick look at where we are once I reach the end of the presentation, but I postulate to you that we have a long way to go. Time, of course, is a critical dimension, like I've said. Both the duration of application and the timing of application are critical for successful outcomes. Interoperability between different armed services and other modern domains of warfare is critical for the success. Interoperability permits efficient exchange of information, resources, and capabilities, and thus enhances your overall operational effectiveness. Adaptability and flexibility are essential once again because the operational environment itself is dynamic and unpredictable. Unless you can adapt, you will get left behind in the OODA loop. By leveraging synergies and by complementary capabilities, MDO enables a commander to create multiple dilemmas for adversaries and provides opportunities for them to exploit their vulnerability. MDO mandates resilience and redundancy. Why? Because you have to continue operations in the face of disruptions and in the face of enemy action. Unless you have resiliency, you will not be able to maintain your operational tempo and effectiveness. Coming to command and control, unless you have robust C2 structures, you will not be able to coordinate across domains of MDO. You must have centralized planning. However, unless you do decentralized execution, you will never be able to match the pace to adapt to the evolving situation. All is not rosy in this picture of MDO, however. There are several challenges, and I will try and touch upon why they are important and the fact that unless they are addressed holistically, they will negate all the advantages that MDO promises. The first is conceptual and doctrine. While the chair brought out the difference between the two, we must understand that MDO is very much an evolving concept today. Traditional doctrine addresses land, sea, and air largely in individual silos. MDO seeks to break these silos. It seeks simultaneous and integrated effects across not only these three domains, but cyber, electromagnetic, and space. This straightaway creates ambiguity in definitions of domain ownership, definitions of command responsibility, and creates decision dilemmas in terms of escalation thresholds, especially in cyber and space. As brought out, I will reiterate that different armed forces interpret MDO differently, and this leads to doctrinal divergence rather than convergence, which we have to resolve. Despite doctrinal joint doctrines which have been issued, they do not address this problem completely, and military services continue to plan and fight from domain-centric or service-centric perspectives. Air forces tend to emphasize centralized control and strategic reach, while land forces often prioritize tactical immediacy and static areas of responsibility. This cultural inertia and the cross-coupling thereof will slow true multi-domain integration. When we come to C2 and decision-making, you need to synchronize the command and control chain rapidly across domains operating at different speeds. This provides a serious problem. Cyber and space actions happen in milliseconds, air operations unfold in minutes and hours, but land and maritime operations may take days. Traditional hierarchical C2 structures struggle to cope with this temporal mismatch. Advanced ISR, space sensors, cyber intelligence, and AI-enabled feeds generate enormous data volumes today. Unless you effectively filter and fuse these, the commanders risk slower decision cycles, cognitive overload, and loss of initiative. This will thereby undermine the very objective of MDO, which is decision dominance. Coming to technology and integration, you have to have seamless integration of sensors, shooters, command nodes across the services and the other domains which we operate in. However, today, platforms use incompatible data standards, legacy systems find it difficult to integrate with modern networks, and proprietary technologies limit information sharing. This will have to be addressed as we go forward. The very same networks that enable MDO are also its greatest vulnerability. Adversaries can disrupt data links, they can inject false information, and they can paralyze your command networks. This creates a very, very real paradox. Your greater connectivity which you require imposes operational fragility as you increase it. In the space domain, we rely heavily on satellites for PNT, for ISR. However, space is getting increasingly contested, and the ability to deny your space asset can actually cripple joint air and land operations. One of the biggest issues is, of course, the human being in the loop. Effective MDO demands commanders and planners who understand the capabilities and the limitations of all domains, cross-domain dependencies, and to understand strategic consequences of single-domain escalation. Most military education systems, even today, unfortunately, still produce single-service specialists and thereafter domain specialists, but not multi-domain integrators. We will have to once again look at this aspect if we have to move forward. Also, a point to keep in mind is training. Your true multi-domain exercise is very expensive and very technologically demanding. How do you effectively simulate all of space, all of cyber, and the EM effects realistically is a challenge we have not yet cracked. Finally, logistics. MDO places a very, very large strain on logistics due to a very high consumption of precision munitions, dependence on contested supply chains, and the vulnerability, of course, of the logistic network to cyber and kinetic attacks. Sustaining multi-domain operations over time is far more demanding than executing short, high-intensity campaigns. When we look at the evolving battle space, there are certain aspects we can quickly look at, which I will touch upon. AI and machine learning, of course, have the potential to revolutionize military operations, and the DGNO will touch upon it in detail in his talk. Data, of course, is the new gunpowder, and data management and exploitation is critical to our success. Information operations, again, will be touched upon by the ADG Stratcom, and the importance of these will continue to go. However, I will just put one caveat in this, is that information operations in isolation, without physical effect, may not have the desired impact, and in fact might lead to loss of credibility. Coming to cyber and EW, these lines between the two will continue to blur, and we will have to develop capabilities to operate in a very contested electromagnetic cyber environment, which will need new thinking and new technologies. Hybrid asymmetric threats, of course, we will face complex and adaptive threats, and we will have to conceptualize and come up with the ability to counter these. Data I've brought out is most important resource that we will have shortly. How to protect, how to exploit this data is going to be a key challenge. Finally, our core competencies must not be lost sight of. In our effort to blur the lines of everything, unless we operate effectively and competently in our core domains, we will not be able to leverage them in the right manner. Last is, of course, coercive actions in non-physical domains. So we have seen in recent geopolitical terms, US actions in Venezuela, etc., that both merging the coercion in physical and non-physical domains is essential to eventually meet your objectives. To summarize, I would say the following: effective integration is critical, but synchronization of this effect is decisive. We need a unified and coordinated effort across domains, and we will have to actually devise the architecture to do so. Time, as I have brought out, is a critical factor, and both speed and timing on the modern battle space are going to prove game changers. Domains, of course, are interdependent and cannot be optimized in isolation. Their integration and the understanding of how domain capability impacts a neighboring domain is once again a factor which will have to be kept in mind, both during capability and during exercising. And finally, services with core competencies remain essential to control and synchronize these domains, thus enabling better and more effective domain integration. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, multi-domain operations represent an evolution in my mind and not a revolution in warfare. However, there are many factors which we need to keep in mind and treat with caution before we can just successfully prosecute multi-domain operations in their true aspect. With that, I have finished, and I am looking forward to the Q&A session later. Thank you.
I'll request the DGNO, Vice President Admiral Pramod, to present his talk.
Former Chiefs of the Air Staff, former CNCs and CISC, Air Vice Marshal Anil Gulani, DG CAPS, General Officer, Air Officers, distinguished veterans, defense attaches, members from think tank, academia, research foundations and industries, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, good morning to you all. At the outset, may I thank the DG CAPS for giving me an opportunity to be part of this seminar. I will present a talk on autonomous weapon systems, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and multi-domain enablers in future wars. Ladies and gentlemen, today we have arrived at a decisive inflection point in military history where the character of warfare is being reshaped not incrementally but fundamentally. As we deliberate on national security imperatives in multi-domain operations, I will, over the next 15 minutes, address the transformative impact of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and autonomous weapon systems on national security in an increasingly contested and compressed strategic environment. Emerging technologies are altering the traditional asymmetries in warfare at sea as well, where once the seas reflected the overwhelming imbalance in favor of larger navies, today's technology is allowing even the smaller actor to pose outsized threats. With the proliferation of autonomous off-the-shelf drones, networked through commercial satellites in air, surface, and subsurface domains, even non-state actors and proxies possess a level of precision strike capability once reserved for major naval powers. Across the world, nations are racing to harness autonomy in combat by using artificial intelligence and machine learning-driven systems. Military automation and independent systems are already deployed in various roles across all military domains, which are transforming military operations very sharply and rapidly. The United States, China, Russia, Israel, and Ukraine are deploying AI-enabled drones, loiter munitions, and autonomous targeting platforms. Israel's Lavender and Gospel systems related to intelligence, Russia's loitering munitions, and Ukraine's AI-driven reconnaissance drones illustrate how autonomous weapon systems are shifting warfare from human in the loop to human on the loop. As the chair just alluded, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, recent Israel-Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, Iran conflict, and Op Midnight Hammer by US against Iran, all demonstrated multi-domain operations. In Op Midnight Hammer, other than the B-2 bombers, USS Georgia, Ohio-class submarines, carried out attack, being present in the Mediterranean Sea, carried out attack with 30 Tomahawk missiles. The recent US operations against Venezuela is a classical multi-domain operations where, other than the year-long intelligence and information operations, coupled with space, cyber, and special ops, the Air Force, the Delta Force, the Marines, and the naval assets were employed to do the execution of this mission in just less than 10 minutes' time. Against this backdrop, the Indian Navy has been actively pursuing adoption of AI across operational, technical, and administrative domains. At present, Indian Navy has 45 plus AI applications at various stages of development and deployment. The Navy is also investing in capacity building by creating the required infrastructure. Towards institution of AI framework and infrastructure, IN has established Indian Navy Incubation Center for Artificial Intelligence at Bangalore in Jan 2023 and commissioned our first AI compute center, Crystal, with state-of-the-art GPUs in March 2025. The center is being utilized for development and training of various AI models. One of these models is trained on 32,000 naval documents and is being extensively utilized as an interactive chatbot. Additionally, our Technology Development and Acceleration Cell, or TDAC, is closely collaborating with startups, industry, and academia to develop advanced capabilities like tethered drones, high-altitude pseudo-satellites, autonomous underwater swarms, and boat swarms. A few key AI projects being steered by the Indian Navy include the National Maritime Domain Awareness Project, which integrates 15 maritime agencies and about 8 ministries, Indian Navy Common Operating Picture, Indian Navy Operational Data Framework, which integrates all the sensors and data is collected, mainly it's a data lake which has been created, Smart Elent Exploitation and Dissemination System, AI-based radar, EOIR, sonar, and LOFAR data analysis, AI-enabled prediction of degradation, maintenance and management of propulsion systems, AI-based inventory and logistic management, and so on. The Indian Navy is scheduled to induct large-scale autonomous vessels for multi-domain operations, including surface, subsurface, and air. These platforms will be capable of undertaking a plethora of missions, which include anti-submarine warfare, mine warfare, C4ISR missions, anti-surface warfare, long-range strike, air defense, and land attack. The niche platforms include, as I mentioned, high-altitude pseudo-satellites, air-launched anti-radiation combat swarms, naval collaborative combat aerial vehicles, naval aerial robotic systems, high-endurance autonomous underwater vessel for multi-missions, including anti-submarine warfare and mine warfare. The availability of air autonomous platforms coupled with AI and ML-based C4I systems would ensure seamless situational awareness, decision support systems, provide so-called battle space dominance and real-time engagement of targets with precision and lethality at standoff ranges at a time and place of our choosing without risking the human element. The proliferation of autonomous underwater platforms also poses a significant threat in the maritime domain. It is a major force multiplier to enforce anti-access area denial capability, especially for a weaker force. It could also be a potential rogue element jeopardizing freedom of navigation. The integration of AI in multi-domain operations reflect a shift towards being a network force when informed decisions are at machine speed and coordinated horizontally across all services. This would leverage jointness of operations as assets of one force could become the data source for another force. In the air domain, AI, ML, and autonomous system could integrate unmanned combat aerial vehicles and autonomous wingmen supporting fighter aircraft with coordinated decision-making. AI can enhance space situational awareness and cyber ops, forming part of an interconnected operational theater. Unmanned surface vessels and unmanned underwater vehicles powered by AI and machine learning can conduct large-scale maritime surveillance, mine countermeasures, and reconnaissance missions without exposing the crew to danger. AI/ML enables commands to process large volumes of sensor data, leading to faster and more accurate decisions, a critical advantage in high-tempo conflict and multi-domain operations. Autonomy also allows a smaller fleet to exert influence over larger areas. Fewer manned platforms accomplish larger objectives by leveraging autonomous assets. In all these advancements, cross-domain sensor fusion is the foundational capability. Future warfare demands integration across land, sea, air, space, cyber, and electronic EM spectrum domains simultaneously. The American Joint All-Domain Command and Control concept and similar initiatives aim to create unified data fusion where any sensor can inform shooter across any domain. Distributed operations become possible through these enablers. Collaborative combat aircraft, loyal wingman program, autonomous underwater vehicles operating in coordinated wolf packs, along with networked ground robots, can create robust kill webs. The future is human-machine teaming at an unprecedented scale and speed, with profound implications for how we think about command, control, and tempo of warfare. The existing traditional command and control structures assure information flow upward through hierarchical layers. Decisions are made at appropriate command levels and orders flow down for execution. However, when timelines compressed to seconds or milliseconds with hypersonic weapon engagements, cyber stacks, electronic warfare ducts, hierarchical command and control may not be the best of the options. This may necessitate redefining command and control aspects as one of the emerging doctrinal responses. This may also entail decentralization, pushing decisions authority to the tactical edge while maintaining strategic coherence through clearly communicated commander's intent and algorithmic coordinated protocols. Another significant aspect is that as part of exploitation of autonomous systems, ethical and legal distinctions remain unresolved. International humanitarian law requires distinction, that is, correctly identifying legitimate military targets versus civilians and protected objects. Proportionality, that is, ensuring the expected military advantage justifies anticipated collateral harm. And precautions, taking all feasible measures to minimize civilian casualties. In this context, human-machine teaming is a more realistic near-term model than full autonomy. Human provides what AI currently cannot: judgment in novel situations, ethical reasoning about proportionality and necessity, strategic context that connects tactical actions to political objectives, legal accountability, and the ability to recognize when something is simply wrong despite algorithmic confidence. Thus, ethical and legal frameworks would necessitate human oversight and compliance with international law. Warfare is transitioning from a platform-centric model to a data, autonomous, and network-centric model. Military forces that successfully integrate these enablers with traditional platforms will achieve decisive advantages in future high-intensity conflict in contested oceans and littorals. Finally, to conclude, we all are aware that we are somewhat behind the curve in the field of autonomous platforms, weapons and systems embedded with AI/ML enabled features in terms of technology absorption, design and development, production, and subsequent op employment in a synergized and integrated multi-domain environment. It is in this regard that this session on national security operations in MDO holds relevance and significance towards understanding the combat potential of autonomous systems and to aid towards formulation of a roadmap for leapfrogging and creating a technological ecosystems through focused R&D, setting up of a defense ecosystem, technical industrial capacity with definitive timelines, incorporation of doctrinal changes, and availability of a pool of engineers or trained operators in AI, ML, and data analytics for undertaking integrated, net-centric, data-enabled, effect-based multi-domain operations, including manned and unmanned teaming. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Vice Admiral Pramod. We now have Major General Sharda, ADG Stratcom.
The chair, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank the DG CAPS for inviting me over for this talk. And the topic of my talk is as given on the slide, which is cognitive warfare in multi-domain operations. Let me first stick my neck out by saying that wars do not begin with a shot, but with a story, especially in the modern world. And this is born out of, in the past, whatever 1.5 years, one has been in disappointment and gone over various, whatever conflicts which have been there. So whatever will start today will be with the story. If you take your mind to any current conflict or just recently done, there also you will always find a story before a conflict. But is it true for modern world? I don't think so. The DG Air Ops took you 1,000 years back. Let me take you even further back. And let's come to the Mahabharata, and where the war began at the dice game or even before that. It is not the dice game, it is even before that. But let's take dice game as a seminal point. So dice game, and that was where the war started and not at the battlefield. Just to, while this August gathering doesn't require any kind of, talk on what is cognitive warfare, but I thought pertinent to mention a few issues about cognitive warfare before I come to the latter part of my presentation. The first is that the cognitive warfare is fighting for control of people, how people think. It is not what people think, it is how they think, how their mind is wired, how to change that wiring, how to make them think in the manner you want them to think. And how does it work? It uses narratives, stories, with what? With the tools, news, fake news, rumors, etc., to spread fear, anger, other emotions through any media, especially social media in today's world. And why is it dangerous? Because you don't get to know that you are under attack. You are always under attack every day, every morning, every afternoon, every evening. And there are no alarms or warnings. Elsewhere, maybe there'll be a blip on the radar or something else to tell that there is an attack or something, or at least some hint. Here there is no hint. It is going to be a sudden, it's an everyday affair. There are no bullets, no nothing, and no borders or boundaries. A person sitting in South America can affect your mind while sitting here in Delhi. So who are these soldiers in the cognitive warfare? The soldiers are the influencers, the fake accounts, the trolls, bots, etc., you name it. The media channels, when I say media channels, I don't mean the media as we understand it is various mediums which come to you through the print, through the digital, through social media, through activity that you see, all that kind of medium shapes your beliefs. Ordinary people, everyone on the street is again a soldier because you are forwarding messages, you are sending angry posts or anything at all. So that is there, everyone unwittingly or deliberately is part of that system. We talked of the two speakers before, we talked of the multi-domain operation, so I will not talk about it. All that I would want to say in Indian context when we look at it, the physical domain and the supporting domain are looking at affecting the cognition of person, the decision makers across, when you talk of operations. However, at the larger sense, it is the cognition of the entire nation or the population or the target population that you want to address. Every domain actually ultimately aims to influence the human decision. You take any war or anything, it is about making the enemy or the adversary submit to your will and not anything else. How you make him submit is your ingenuity. Whether you do it only through the social media, which we have seen in the, these precedences in the past couple of years, or you make them do with minimum action or full-scale war. So that is the ingenuity. I shall come to a case study of Operation Sindoor. Now, the case study can take the entire day, so I have limited myself to the misinformation, disinformation, and the malinformation which was thrown at us during that time. What happened, we all know, so I'm not going to go over it on 7th of May. I'm just taking the first day. Why? Because this is where I want to come to. What was reported? On the left, you see an Indian newspaper. On the right, what you see is a Pakistani newspaper. And in the middle, you see an international one. So you see the biases, you see the reporting channels, what they want you to see. And hence, that population which is reading it, this is just one snapshot. There are many other newspapers, there are many other sources of news that those population are going through. So each one of them is putting a certain story out based on the editorial board that they have, based on the directions that they have. And famously, Joseph Nye has said in the information age, it is not just whose army wins, but it is also whose story wins. As I said, let me first, I'm more focusing on the disinformation and the fake news which came across. Now, what was the scale of this dis and malinformation? Deep fakes, doctored videos, lies through official channels itself, through official, the press conferences. And what was the larger issues that they were bringing about? I have just listed a few of them to the right of it. But what you can see is that they have tried to strike at you with information which is being fed through a central agency there, that is the DGISPR. And what all other actions? These are what I have called out is not just what we have seen, it is the reports which are there in various media as well as
in various forums which one has come across. There have been 7 APT groups, more than 15 lakh cyber attacks on 7th May itself, approximately 30 million attacks on the National Stock Exchange on the first day itself, during that conflict of 4-5 days. And Pakistan deployed a large number of YouTube channels, X accounts, government handles towards this spread of fake news. A large number of accounts, disseminated this, and within 30 to 40 minutes, the language was nearly the same. There was hardly any difference of a comma in that. There were more, we had analyzed a few threads. More than 1 lakh videos were generated from the same 43 threads of similar kind. They try to influence through what we call today the influencers. We all know the Jyoti Malhotra case very well. Now, what was the global narrative which was happening? Now, the Hindu Post, it took out documents of 15 instances of global media which was spreading this Pak's unverified claim. What you see on the right are the various news agencies or the news houses, and what kind of news were they spreading in this period of 6 to 8 days after that. And we also went into details as to who's doing it for them. And there we traced their origins to a large number of these Pakistani journalists embedded deep into these various media houses and the agencies over there. And has it stopped? It continues. If you see the panels on the top, from 7th May onwards, even now on 14 Jan, and even today in the morning, we have another doctored video which is out. And in the past 4 months itself, the ADG Stratcom itself has called out 217 deepfakes, of which 164 relate to Army, the CDS 9, Chief of the Army Staff 23, the Chief of Air Staff 4, and the Chief of Naval Staff 3. So today, when any of the chiefs speak at any forum, within half an hour you have a perfectly made AI-based fake, deep fake, in which they change only a little bit of it so that it looks authentic. You never know what the DGNO and the DG Air Ops have spoken today. Maybe in another half an hour you will see a deep fake of this itself. All right. Now, what was done at the national level? While we are aware that initially itself on 26th April, on our request, the Information and Broadcasting Ministry had given out an advisory for to restrain reporting of live movement or defense operations. Post that, on the first night when a lot of people reported that there was fake news or something in the Indian media as well. So there was an overnight interministerial coordination cell which was created at the National Media Center, where the officers of the 3 services were continuously on rotation. They were posted there to ensure that this fake news from across is not spread to the entire population. We called out 1,400 URLs which were blocked by MeitY. So many channels, 1825 YouTube channels and 740 million views were wiped out based on the request that we made to MeitY again. And very interestingly, for the audience, this thing that 9/10 of the earnings from YouTube of Pakistani influencers come from India. The moment this was stopped, their earnings reduced to 1/10. And there were multiple requests from the opposite side through various means to open it, that we will, you should not do it. Our earnings are going down. So that is a kind of interdependency is there as far as influencers is concerned. 3,200 bots and 480 ISI accounts were blocked by X. 192 handles and their 500,215 posts were blocked, which we had called out as inflammatory accounts. 64 AI-generated lies were dismantled, and at that time, in less than 15 minutes, we could request PIB. The system had got so well oiled that the PIB could issue a clarification in less than 15 minutes of that video being out. We had done a lot as far as the psychological defense is concerned for the services, and the activities that were done spread over to about 31 billion views across the globe as well as within India. What basically was done by the ADC Stratcom was to ensure that these fake news were called out at the earliest so that they don't reach the population as intended. Now, let me connect all this to the topic of this seminar, which is the implications for national security or national security imperatives. Now, firstly, the geopolitical ramifications. As we are well aware, and what we have seen in the recent couple of years also, these kind of cognitive warfare, they shift international alliances by influencing partner nations' views. It is happening even today. In the past couple of days, newspapers, you would be seeing it in the Western world. It escalates tensions through manufactured crisis. You would have seen it in India's neighborhood. It weakens a nation's global standing via sustained reputational damage, integrates with hybrid warfare to challenge territorial and info sovereignty, which the Chinese have been trying to do for many years, especially along our northern borders and on their eastern coast as well. It reduces power asymmetries. The DGNO had just given that out. It reduces power asymmetries, allowing weaker actors to compete through mental domains apart from physical domains as well. ISIS is a very good example of this. Erosion of trust in institutions. Once the cognitive warfare is unleashed on a particular set and it starts believing it, it undermines the public confidence in government leadership and the security and the int agencies, and which, leads to skepticism amongst the population towards the official narratives. So essentially what you have done is that you have totally undermined the government's narrative in that particular population. It thus increasing the susceptibility to foreign influence operations by the actor aimed at internal disturbances. And lastly, it complicates implementation of security measures due to public resistance and doubt. Not only security measures, also policy measures. Farm laws is a very good example of this. Manipulation of public opinion, we are well aware of this. It shapes societal narratives to align with adversarial geopolitical interests. It polarizes the communities, influences electoral outcomes, which were the reports in the US 2020 elections, reduces public support for national defense initiatives or international alliances, amplifies internal dissent, making it harder to maintain unified security strategies. It also leads to threats to border and territorial security. Whatever is listed on the left, you can relate the first two bullets to the Chinese actions in the South China Sea, and the bottom two to the Pakistani actions along the IB as well as the LC in Kashmir as well. But what we have seen so far is just tip of the iceberg as I look at it. With the emerging technologies, this future of cognitive warfare is extremely, extremely dangerous. The AI and ML, deepfakes and synthetic media, neurotechnology and the brain-computer interface, the AR and VR and immersive technology, social media and big data exploitation. Till now, most of the cognitive warfare was targeted at a larger population. It looked at a certain sect, it looked at certain, towns, maybe villages, maybe a state, such like. However, with these technologies, you shall be able to pinpoint and direct, if let's say 200 of us are sitting here, right, I'll just take 2 more minutes, sir. And the adversary can target each 200 of us individually. Where, given the time, I will limit it to that we need a national doctrine as soon as possible. We need a national strategic communication body with all stakeholders as soon as possible. Indigenization and Atmanirbharta of the tech stack, that is what you depend on, your Google, your WhatsApp, everything. And most importantly, enhancing the cognitive resilience not only of the service personnel, but also the entire nation. I have finished, sir.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree that we've heard 3 very informative talks by the 3 panelists here. We are a little hard-pressed for time. I will immediately throw the question-answer session open between the panelists in case they want to ask something to each other. Just before that, one thought came to my mind when he was talking about information warfare. Even the DG AirOps mentioned about this, how information warfare is, cuts across all the domains. Here, for CAPS and the scholars, I would like to, just make a point that we have a penchant for studying Western theories and Western philosophies. If you look at the way the Chinese have developed the informatized warfare, if you look at the Gerasimov doctrine of the Russians, this has been talking about the same thing for over a decade and a half. Lesser of those lessons are being implemented or being, followed in our context. So I think we need to expand our study to look at how every other nation is doing this information warfare business. So without much ado, in case you have anything? No?
Probably just one observation, sir, on something the DGNO brought out, and he brought out very correctly that the actions in Venezuela very well brought out all the aspects of MDO that we are talking about, and they were well coordinated. However, I'd just like to point out, or maybe take his view on, in a highly asymmetric situation where one side has almost unlimited resources and the other does not, should we be cautious in taking those lessons across to near-peer, budget-strapped environment which is highly contested, and the balance which all 3 of us are probably doing between legacy, hard power, and the new age, aspects of MDO is a difficult, ask to do so.
You would like to answer?
I completely agree, sir.
Okay.
Only thing here is that if US has looked at the regime change, probably if you look at Iraq and now, this is done a much faster way without any major long period. Just within minutes, they achieved what they were. In Iraq, they took ages.
Yeah, but I think this is a classic example where, when you're talking about MDO, your focus is on speed of action, speed of maneuver, speed of communications. All this was achieved there. This is one case uniquely where speed in tactical action has got strategic outcomes. It is not necessarily so. We should not always believe that, the more tempo you have in tactical operations, the faster will be a strategic outcome. That may not happen every time. Okay, the house is open. I see quick hands. Yeah. Please be brief and to the point. We are a little short of time.
Manish Kumar Jha, National Security Editor. You raised a very pertinent point about we are lacking in autonomous system. My question to you basically, it's so important, but how should we talk about the AI and integration in the existing system and the possibility we should have completely a new thing, new machine, new system, and then we can integrate. How can this be possible in the present circumstances of the military equipment and system, especially from the Air Force perspective? How much we can, achieve that, especially, and how far? Thank you. Yeah, to autonomous. Yeah.
If the capability was available and everything there, then I would have straight away, and budget available, then I would have straight away looked at replacing and set up all the new things. But in our case, everything, including from technology to gestation period of induction and then operationalization, there's a lead time involved. So we need to be very, very cautious that we have to work with the existing infrastructure system available, and then we move on to this thing. So as far as possible, keeping everything in mind, backward compatibility, and progressively achieve over a period of time, we achieve the newness in the entire thing and go in for the latest and modern AI, ML enabled system or infrastructure or system of systems what we are looking at.
Thank you. I see the Angad had it. Yeah. Please take the mic there.
So,
Yeah, Angad, go ahead, please.
I have two questions. I'll be quick. One was in response to Air Marshal Thomas's presentation, but addressed to all panelists. What would a command and control, an Indian command and control structure for MDO look like, or what should it look like in your view? And the second was about information operations. We talked about, we heard about biases in global press. So the question is, if the global media is sort of uncritically parroting Pakistani or even Chinese talking points, is that their success or our failure that we haven't been able to cultivate those biases in our favor? Thank you.
You'd like to answer it? Yeah.
Can I take a second question first? You asked that you have, if I understand it correctly, that we have the Pak-oriented, orientation of the Western media. So what should we do? Is that the question? All right. Let me first say that this has not happened in the past couple of years, that they have got this kind of a influence in the Western media. They have been working at it for decades. And so it requires time. It requires continuous funding and support. And it is from their highest echelons there who are conducting this in a deliberate manner to position people at the right places, both in media as well as in various chairs of excellence related to media. I'm sure things are being done here also, which maybe I'm not privy to, but suffice to say that we see less of Indian faces amongst the anchors, etc., that you see on the Western media. And it is not that nothing is being done. Things are being done towards that end, and I am sure you will see the result. Lastly, we also must understand that India as such is a growing power, and any growth of any power will always face friction. And that friction is what comes to you in these forms. And this is one of those forms of, where you are being targeted for something which may not have been done.
Thank you. Pramod, you'd like to take on this first part? Yeah.
The command and control aspects, as the chair had brought out that, first of all, we were doing multi-domain operations. We are capable now also of carrying out multi-domain operations. But your question is a pertinent question, that what kind of command and control you would like to envisage in keeping in pace with the technology. So first of all, there's no set command and control pattern which is there. You would see the examples all over the world that it depends a lot of things. Sometimes it depends on the type of government which is there. Sometimes it depends on what kind of objectives you are looking at. Sometimes it depends on what kind of area of influence what you are, or area of operations is there. The culture, many other aspects are there. But what we want to achieve in this is that your systems have to be in place to carry out the ultimate objective to undertake that multi-domain operations is that you have to be integrated. Rather than sequencing, you have to have a synergized operation. These are the key words which we need to have: integrated and synergized operations. If we have to have synergized operations, command and control, the clear objectives have to be defined. The command and control has to be very, very streamlined and decentralized execution. If all these things have to happen, we have to have the command and control itself require an infrastructure. So that infrastructure needs to separate. Architecture for integrated, that means hardware, software, applications, all these things have to be seamless. So once this is done, then we could look at forming a command and control, but centralized objective, but decentralized execution. This is what we are looking at.
Okay, thank you. Let me add a two-anna bit here. You know, the dilemma always is what level should MDO be conducted, whether you go like the ghost unit of the Israeli forces or to expand it further. The point you have to keep in mind is that larger static headquarters, when you're talking about so much of data flowing in and out, will be vulnerable to attacks. The amount of electromagnetic radiation given out by large static headquarters is enough to make it a primary target. So we have to reach a compromise somewhere. There is dissonance in the Western world about when you talk about multi-domain operations, whether the military should lead it at all. You know, there was a debate in the UK Parliament a few months ago whether, since you're talking about an all-of-government approach, then should the military be in lead? Was the debate done? There are no outcomes of that which are known, but like I said, it can vary. Ideally, we should not go in for too huge an organizational structure, which is going to be, you know, targeted very easily. Marshal Bedi.
So, Marshal Bedi, so question to General Sharda on cognitive warfare. You showed a slide that it does not matter, a quote, it does not matter whose army wins, but it matters whose story wins. So now I think, I hope we don't go overboard. I think it's important for the armies to win first, and along with that, work on your story. Because, you know, I don't know whether, there is a general belief that Pakistan's story did better than our story. Now, I don't know whether we would like to be in Pakistan's shoes, where our armies did not do well, but our story did well. Having said that, now I believe if we call it cognitive warfare and information warfare, then they say everything is fair in love and war. Fake news is a tool of this warfare, and they will be there. The problem for us is, not so much of fake news, but stupid news. And why I say that our media, if you saw the spectacle on Indian media, which catered probably more to domestic audience for, you know, their gung-ho attitude or, you know, some kind of celebration, veterans, you know, coming and saying all sorts of things, which international audience will get impressed with this kind of narrative and toe your line or, you know, talk for you? You know, I think we need to work on our international influence, and rather than only, you know, putting down, let's say, whatever is adversary doing in international media, probably need to work more proactively and offensively in that domain. Your views. Thank you.
Sir, first, when you were saying about story and whether the army or the forces, they have to win first and the story wins. We were talking of the Venezuelan, you know, the case itself, sir. If you look at the Venezuelan case, sir, the first thing that started was with the story itself. And they created a sort of a environment where they could do it with impunity. Similarly, you see any others. So what I'm trying to bring about is, and it is not that it is not being done by others also. Everyone has been doing it till now. But now it is easier and more required because of the technology that is available to you. Every person today has that information. He's a reporter, he's a analyst, everything in his hand. So if that be the case, your story has to start first, sir. If your story starts first and you have the correct environment, so that MDO, what we all spoke of, the information is the enveloping story, sir. So till the time you don't have the envelopment, the rest of it will always suffer, number one. Number two, you talked of the audiences, sir. Let's say in this case also that I brought about, there are three, let's categorize them into three basic audiences. You have the adversaries audience, you have the domestic audience, and then you have the international audience. Now after the first day and once things started hotting up on the media, so both sides, as I told that what we did, similarly Pakistan did. So as a result, both became echo chambers. So this had reinforcing stories within their own nations. As a result, you had your own stories running here, they had their own stories running there. Now coming to international. Now international, while it is not the charter of the services, however, a lot was being done to ensure that in concert with other agencies. It is not that we were functioning alone. With the other agencies of the government, other arms of the government, a lot was being done at that time. But we need to do more. What you said is right. What we need to do more is in international arena. There are a number of actions that are already underway, sir, that we can discuss after this during the tea times.
So I'd just like to add 2 quick points to what I agree with ADG Stratcom, that the enveloping of the action is a very important role that Stratcom does. But I have 2 points for you to consider. So the first is Venezuela's success story. Everything happened fast, the tempo was great, tactical. It worked. If they had not been able to pull him out, or if they had suffered casualties or the helicopters had crashed, or there had been a problem, it would have been a different story. So the tactical success on ground, or the effect on ground, has to be there. The second is about the impact of Pakistan's campaign in the first. I would argue there is a short-term and a long-term impact which we have to look at. In the short term, you're fighting the war, which he has brought out very well, and how the the number of bots and the other fake narratives continue to multiply. But in the long term, sir, the holes in the runway are there for everyone to see. All the fake narrative, all the doctored videos of attacks on our bases don't exist, and they have been proven false. Whereas every single DMPI that we hit and caused impact on, in fact, they're still repairing. Rahim Yar Khan has gone on for 4 months. So eventually, credibility goes down, the truth will come out. So while I completely endorse his view in the short term of doing a concerted approach, in the long term, if you have effect, that effect will show.
Thank you. I think we're completely out of time. Has anybody got time for one quick question? Thank you. I'm not scanning the audience once again. The bottom line of all what the 3 speakers had brought out on conduct of multi-domain operations rests on the backbone of having the technological prowess, particularly in the field of communications, because for all the 5 or 6 domains to work in synchronization, you require effective, resilient communication network. And that is something that we should not, over-rely upon in today's state of affairs. Having an overconfidence in our technological prowess may be detrimental to actually developing this capability. So let's face the reality to know where we stand technologically, whether we are in a position today to conduct multi-domain operations at a large scale is something that we all need to take back as a lesson from this seminar. And I urge all those in uniform and still in service to contemplate on what are to create a roadmap for developing the necessary technologies to be able to prosecute multi-domain operations in future. And lastly, one word of caution, please avoid overemphasizing on jargon, on adjectives, on bombastic statements, on hype and hyperbole, that to say that, okay, we have got this, we are going to do this. Please, form should never trump substance. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I think the panelists deserve a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and speakers, for sharing your valuable insights. May I now request Air Chief Marshal R.K.S. Bhaduria to kindly come up on the stage and felicitate our discussant and panelists with the token of appreciation. May I also request Director General CABS, Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani, to kindly come up on the stage for the group photograph. We will now begin with session 2, which is aptly themed Reimagining National Security in a Multipolar World. As the stage is being set for session 2, let me introduce the chair and the panelists. Mr. Nitin Pai will preside over the session. Mr. Pai is the co-founder and director of the Takshashila Institution, an independent center for research and education in public policy. His current research includes economic statecraft and technology geopolitics. He also teaches international relations, public policy, and ethical reasoning at Takshashila graduate programs. The panelists of this session are Professor Harsh Pant, Vice President, ORF and Studies at Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. He is a professor of international relations with King's India Institute at King's College, London. He is also director honorary of Delhi School of Transnational Affairs at Delhi University. Our next panelist is Mr. Anshuman Tripathi, who is a national security technology evangelist. He is a former member of the National Security Advisory Board and member of the Indian government's Empowered Committee on High-Tech Manufacturing. Our third panelist is Ambassador Ashok Sajjanal. He is the Executive Council member of MPIDSA. He is also the president of the Institute of Global Studies and distinguished fellow, Aspen Ananta Center. He also served as a former ambassador of India to Kazakhstan, Sweden, and Latvia. Ambassador Sajjanal has discharged his responsibilities in the Indian Foreign Service for 34 years. I now invite the chair and the panelists to kindly come up on the stage. I now request Mr. Pai to kindly take over the session. Over to you.
Thank you. We've started at noon, so I think we'll go up to 13:30. So I will be the person between defending you and your lunch break. Good morning, everyone. It's a fantastic moment to be here talking about this particular session, because I was just checking my phone 5 minutes ago to see whether we are still in a multipolar world or a world, unipolar world. It's sort of changing every hour. So you have to be very precise about what session you are in. But what I'll do today is give ample time for the panelists to speak to each other and to you, so that we can have a discussion here rather than a sort of monologue, because the people here are eminent enough. You've read them, you've read their books, you've read their articles. So a monologue is probably not the best format to get value out of them. So we'll get them to speak for about 10 minutes in a first session, and then get them to speak for another 8 minutes in response to each other, and then I'll open it up to Q&A. So what I will not spend too much time talking about the session, but just give you some background information, sort of background context for you to frame this, right? Indian philosophy has an idea called Yuganta, right? It's because Indian philosophy looks at history and time in cycles, and there is a yuga which changes, and then there's order which changes, and in between orders there is a period called Yuganta. And when I was reading, I'm an electrical engineer. I'm not educated in the classics or in social sciences. So I was trying to look at this, and it's an elaborate construct where people have thought deeply about what happens in a world between orders. When one order changes and before another order emerges, there is a space in between called Yuganta, and there is dharma is very different. The rules of conduct for human beings is different, conduct for states, conducts for princes and people involved in the administration are all very different. So the point I'm making about Yuganta is that as much as a time of flux comes out as strange or unusual to people, civilizations like ours, and I suppose the Chinese, have an understanding of what happens in the interregnum, because history is not seen as a linear progression, but there are cycles. So in that sense, psychologically, we are probably a little better prepared to understand and sail through these times than people who believe in a linear sense of history. That's number one. Number two is I purposely use the word flux because I think it is way too early to conclude that the world is multipolar or unipolar or apolar, right? Because a pole implies that there is a central power, the pole who contributes security and maybe contributes economic dynamism around which the periphery is aligned. So you have to be a net provider of security, hegemon of some kind, and an economic engine in order to be a pole. But I don't think we are in a world where you could say we are multipolar. Right? We could say that, look, a couple of years ago, it looked like it's going to be sort of somewhat bipolar, one big pole and one not so big pole. But in the last few months, I think it's abundantly clear that we are in a unipolar moment because the world has been shaped by the United States and President Trump in whatever way. I mean, you could put various value judgments on what they've done, but they've proven that they can get their way, and there are very few states who can sort of prevent them from getting it. And, China has been absent from the conversation on Venezuela, absent from what's happening in Iran, absent from what's happening in the Ukraine. Although there is a contribution which China is making to those conflicts, but its power to change outcomes is almost negligible. Right? So these are my arguments, but the reason I'm putting these out to you is please don't think that this is a multipolar world. I think the best way to look at it as a world in flux, and there are no better people to talk about this world than Professor Harsh Pant, who's as much an academic as much as a Delhi insider. You have Mr. Anshuman Tripathi, who has been in the United States, working in Stanford and working in the Technology Center in the US and working in the Indian establishment, and Ambassador Sajanhar, whose record both in and out of the Foreign Service is stellar in terms of what it means to be doing diplomacy in this age. So I'll say maybe give you 10 minutes each. I mean, you could use slides, you don't have to use slides, that's fine, but I would request you to stay within the 10 minutes thing, otherwise we might have to call in some interesting forces to interrupt the 10 minutes time. So, no, I was joking, so please take 10 minutes so that we have enough time for conversation.
So, Nitin, in that spirit, let me sit and talk because I think I don't have slides, but I think it also in the spirit that you have laid out that it's a conversation. I will raise some points and let me start by thanking AVM Gulani and CAPS for having me as part of this very interesting discussion. I will start from where you ended. I think it is important that we don't come to a value judgment because this is indeed, from an analytical point of view, also a moment of transition. Transition between orders, unlike any that we have seen. We have been talking about this transition for a while, but I think now we can see the elements of that transition being operationalized almost on a day-to-day basis. And I think there is a sense of a moment you get when we were growing up. 1990s was a moment you understood was an inflection point. Cold War had definitely ended, and post-Cold War world had started, and India was also on a different track compared to its, in its foreign and national security policy. And I think in some ways, the debate which we are having today on alignments and partnerships, strategic autonomy, is also started manifesting itself in early 1990s when we started thinking as to our partnerships of the past and our partnerships for the future, relationship with this then Soviet Union versus relationship with the West. And I think in some ways this is also a moment of reckoning of that kind, that are we moving in a direction where we'll have to reassess some of the fundamental assumptions we have made about various things. And some of those assumptions have to be challenged because they are being challenged from the stakeholders themselves who have created this order. So whether it is in terms of the institutional fabric, the multilateral order that was created post-1945, whether it is the idea of globalization, economic globalization, and how that will transcend itself, the whole logic of the end of history argument of Francis Fukuyama in early 1990s, that liberal market capitalism, the free market capitalism and liberal democracy would spread around, and that would be the order of the day in terms of ideas. I think all of those assumptions are being questioned in ways and being operationalized in a different way than perhaps we have gotten used to. So in that sense, this is indeed a moment to reflect and to take a step back and not to enter into a value judgment that this is a this is a multipolar world or a bipolar world or even a unipolar world in that sense. Of course, the imprint at different times of different countries is very visible. The only thing we can say of us with a certain degree of certainty is that American unipolarity of 1990s is not visible, but American unipolarity of a certain other kind is visible. And of course, Americans are also going back to Monroe Doctrine and saying, look, before we reach out to the Indo-Pacific or before we reach out to other geographies, Western Hemisphere is where we belong to, and we will consolidate our gains and our power in the Western Hemisphere. So I think this is indeed from that perspective a very interesting moment for India also to think about as to what kinds of alignments and partnerships and how can it enhance or expand the scope of its strategic autonomy. I will talk about multi-alignment because that's the topic by comparing it to non-alignment. After all, non-alignment was also an ambition during the Cold War from an emerging developing country to say that, look, we don't want to be part of the two power blocks, we want to be away from them, and we want to consolidate internally. So internal focus, internal development was the core argument given for building internal resilience for socio-economic development, that we need to be away from power politics. Now, of course, what was interesting was that alignments, often when we talk of alignment, it is a function of a nation's response to its external environment as well as to its own strategic ambitions. So when you think of non-alignment as a response to India's external environment, you also then see how India at critical junctures had to seek help from others. That it was non-alignment, but at critical moments, 1962 war or 1971 war, we were looking at external partners who could provide us support in order to ward off those particular crises. But largely the framework was that we don't want to be part of any one bloc. We don't want to be a treaty alliance partner. I think what has happened in the last decade or so in this country and how we have started thinking about alignment or what we now call as multi-alignment, is that the idea where the argument was that we don't want to enter into very close partnerships, particularly with the West, has been turned on its head. Now we are arguing that the best way to have as much strategic autonomy as possible is to have robust partnerships with multiple stakeholders. Maybe sometimes in specific domains, but also more expansive partnerships. So we have seen how the logic of partnership itself has evolved. Alliances are still a big no-no in Indian strategic consciousness, but partnerships, there has been a gradual acceptance of the logic of partnerships, and therefore certain kinds of partnerships have emerged, whether it is India-US, whether it is India-Russia, of course, has been a long-standing one, but of course, India-Europe. And today, when we talk of how Europe is certainly, very interesting. India-Europe relationships are at a very interesting moment. When this entire month is the European month in India, you can go back and look back the debates during the Cold War and how diffident India was in charting a course with Europe. That Western Europe in particular was a big no-go area because of this argument that India would be seen as an emerging developing country, would be seen as aligning with imperial powers. And I think now when you look at the expanding scope of India-Europe engagement, we are in a different world. We are in a different space. India-EU alignments are very different, and interest alignments are very different, and therefore the logic of those partnerships are very visible to us. India-US partnership, because of various reasons, but especially what has happened in the last year, is under stress, and the argument that, look, the structural realities which had propelled India-US relationship are now under pressure from domestic politics in the US, from the personal predilections of Mr. Trump, etc., etc. You can make an argument, but the reality is that those partnerships are being reevaluated, but there is no diffidence in articulating the need for a partnership. That if India has to grow, if the end goal for India is economic development, then important multifaceted partnerships are essential. And in that context, the idea of multi-alignment has become the sustaining legacy of the last decade. Now, the challenge there is that strategizing is also about prioritizing. Now, if we think about our own domestic capabilities, and the idea, of course, is that we build our domestic capabilities. If the idea is that we are still lacking in domestic capabilities in certain critical sectors or comprehensive national power, then if you have an immediate challenge, how do you manage that challenge? What kind of partnerships do you need? Can you prioritize one partnership over the other? And I think that's where the real dilemma of India-US relationship, of India-China relationship, and in some ways India-Russia relationship, the larger realities also confront us. And therefore, certain kinds of choices inevitably India will have to confront. I think that idyllic space that India has had for a very long time, where India could say that, look, we are very happy being part of BRICS, Quad, and we could make an argument to each side why we are there, and therefore, you could get a pass from Washington, you could get a pass from Moscow. Increasingly, it seems that that space is getting constrained, because the external environment is changing, because the demands of some of our actors are changing. So I think the point that I want to end this on is to basically say that, how do we make those choices? What are the parameters on which we make those choices? I think that is going to be the most important demand on Indian foreign and strategic thinking as we move forward at a time of this flux that Nitin has talked about.
Thank you, Harsh. That's brilliant. Well within time. Thank you very much. As we move on to the second speaker, I just want to put one single line into your mind, is that in the information age, roughly which started 25, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, there's no particular start date, but roughly around that time. You are in a world where we are doing politics by technology, of technology, and for technology. Warfare, I mean, the morning session which you saw, the underlying story, underlying word which cut across all three presentations is technology. It is such a huge element of military affairs and even broader geopolitics and geoeconomics. So to understand the role of technology in warfare, in defense, and in geopolitics is extremely crucial, right? And it needs a level of deep thinking and specialization to be able to articulate it in a way that is conceptually, useful to the community here. No better person than Mr. Tripathi. So he's going to enlighten us over the next 10 minutes on this, and we'll have a second round with him. I'm sure it's going to be a lot more interesting.
Thank you, panel chair. Former chiefs, respected veterans, DG caps, fellow officers, foreign dignitaries, media persons, ladies and gentlemen, I thought I might be the last speaker. It's seldom you get this opportunity to keep so many respected seniors waiting for lunch. But yesterday, I got a call from Chief AP Sir saying to talk about the things that he spoke today morning about. But there's only one catch. He didn't call me, that was fake news. I will talk about technological sovereignty, economic and strategic competition in a multipolar world. I don't care whether it's single pole, multipole, it's a hole or a pole, whatever. India needs technology. And as the respected chief said today morning, we need to improve our speed for acquisition of platforms. And it's like I read his mind. No, I don't have a chip or a bug or any hacked his system. And that's not fake news, that's true. But the Honorable Prime Minister has already set the goal, the objective. We need Viksit Bharat by 2047. And technological sovereignty is implied. So there are countries which are ahead of us in the game of technology sovereignty, but none have actually reached the complete state of sovereignty. Some have raw materials more, some have process and end products more, but there are countries which are ahead, and interestingly and amusingly, some have actually gone past us in the process. So what we have right now is we can copy their processes, we can learn from them, like DIUX from the US, we got IDEX. We can learn and follow the efficient path, or we can take the scenic route. The goal is very well achievable, but if you have to look at acquisition processes, Atmanirbhar Bharat of Make in India that we have right now, startups, joint ventures, technology transfers, which is a pseudonym actually, where actually what we do is the transfer of manufacturing. Licensed manufacturing won't cut the game. In 20 years, we need to get to a very, very superior stage. There are two instruments which we have not spoken about yet that need to be spoken about now. One is acquisition through private equity entities. We've been talking about jet engines, Kaveri engines. I've harassed the GTRE people so much that this month they've put my photograph on their calendar. But they still won't do the technical parts that I told them to do. So they've come up with their own cognitive countermeasures to mollify me, instead of doing what they were supposed to do. But while we were looking for jet engines, we have the Spanish dignitary, I think he is probably out right now. In Spain, we had a company called ITP Aero, which during the COVID era was sold for 1.7 billion euros to Bain Capital of the United States. ITP Aero makes the Euro Typhoon jet engines. One stroke of a pen, 1.7 billion euros, we could have got the state-of-the-art jet engines. Aujourd'hui, today. We didn't have to spend time. We would have had engines with legacy, technology, everything. We're talking about semiconductors. 2008, UAE went and bought the second largest semiconductor making company, which makes the chips for AMD, Global Foundries, $1 billion US. And we have been looking at a larger size. And then comes so apart from private equity, the other way we can actually go forward is a taboo subject in many people's minds, reverse engineering. And I'll talk about both right now, quickly. When we look at foreign exchange for buying companies outside India, India is the second largest destination for foreign sovereign wealth funds from deal count perspective, and the fourth largest from a deal volume. perspective. That means foreign wealth funds of different countries are actually buying into assets into India. But we don't have a sovereign wealth fund to go buy assets outside India. India has today the fourth largest foreign exchange reserves in the world, about $500 billion US. We're just behind 3 countries. So we have come a long way from 1990s when we had a problem of Forex. It is now time that we have our own sovereign wealth fund which can push private equity companies outside India to go buy technologies and help India take the technology envelope forward. Traditionally, the sovereign wealth funds are supply-driven, like the companies in the Middle East, where we have oil. So natural resources are non-commodity trading, like in China. But the newer sovereign wealth funds are demand-driven for strategic assets. The International Forum of Sovereign Wealth Funds states this fact that the largest percentage of SWFs today are primarily mandated for technology. Rule of thumb, if you have enough foreign exchange to pay for your import bills for 1 year or so, you can have a sovereign wealth fund. And we've had that status for a few years now. Last, to keep it short, when I talk about reverse engineering in any setting, the first thing people say, is it legal? Is the intellectual property rights being violated? Let me say, with confidence, that I repeat, US Supreme Court judgment, Bonito Boats versus Thunderboats, 1989, reverse engineering is a legitimate and essential part of the competitive process. There are many ways we can actually get inspired. We can get inspired from Bollywood songs, copying from foreign countries, different songs, or from the pharmaceutical drugs, which can make things at 1/100th the price, the international price. Also, I would like to state reverse engineering is very different from forward engineering and needs to be taught in engineering colleges. Right now, many people say, oh, yeah, we are doing reverse engineering. But no, they are not. They are just scratching the surface. In many cases, the technological gap in India is too wide between the innovative North and the imitative South. So we have a very big green field where we can legitimately look at technologies and basically be inspired. There are global, open source, free IP technologies and indigenous tech which can actually grow and learn from them. That's a no-brainer. So in conclusion, I would just say technology sovereignty is very much possible by 2047, but needs new instruments and policies to accelerate technology acquisition process. And I see that people are still awake. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. This is brilliant. You know, it's nothing like seeing a slide with a small one sentence or two sentences which make the point. And, you know, the sheer, what I would say, breaking the good boy mold is what we've seen in these slides. And that's the route to technological excellence and sovereignty. So thank you very much for this. The third speaker is going to talk about defense diplomacy. But before he starts, I just want to put out a couple of points which I've been making for several years. I used to work in Southeast Asia for many years. And one of the things I observed in almost every single Southeast Asian country, from Singapore onwards, Singapore to the Philippines, you know, if you go eastwards, every single Southeast Asian country had senior officials in civilian sectors who spent times in their armed forces, either as reservists or retired officers. The president of Indonesia now is a former military officer, so was his predecessor. So building military to military contacts at young levels with officers in these countries, and then letting our military officers be part of India's diplomacy in the later years is a trick that we have missed. It's a trick that we've missed. And there are many reasons for it, because the way we have stovepiped our diplomacy into various baskets, and then these baskets, take it upon themselves to pursue professional depth, but not so much of professional networking across sectors. So see, these are some of these things which we have to address. But it's absolutely clear that whether we do defense diplomacy in the way we talk about in terms of exercises, joint exercises and visits to each other, which is military to military contacts, or even broader in terms of getting our uniformed officers or former uniformed officers into chancelleries where they can engage with foreign counterparts in diplomacy, is an idea whose time had come 10 years ago, right? And it's time for us to intensify that. I want to invite Ambassador Sajanhar to talk about the finer aspects of this. And coming from the Foreign Service, I'm sure he has a great insight into the kind of challenges that will be involved in getting defense diplomacy off the ground.
Can I put this here? Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for this very perceptive introduction. Former chiefs, DG Caps, distinguished participants, friends, let me say what a great pleasure it is for me to be here standing in front of you, and my deep appreciation to DG Caps for this invitation. As Mr. Chairman, you have said very rightly, this is an issue, the issue of the subject of defense diplomacy is a rather underappreciated and under-discussed, under-spoken about subjects. So I'm particularly happy that I have this opportunity to share a few thoughts for the next 10 minutes or so with you to begin with. So defense diplomacy, speaking about it, it really came into vogue, into greater prominence after the Second World War, because then it was thought that the normal, finer elements of diplomacy needed to be enhanced with some other core competencies. And in that context, the whole concept that was developed by the US Army of the DIME paradigm, that is DIME, diplomacy, innovation, military, and economic. So all of these have to work together. So defense diplomacy is something that goes much beyond only military diplomacy. And it is, of course, an integral element of Indian foreign policy. It has evolved into that. But, of course, we see that immediately after the Second World War, we had a bipolar world, getting onto a unipolar world in the 1990s. And now the jury might still be out whether we are in a multipolar world or a unipolar world. But I think what could safely be said is that this definitely is a period of interregnum, that we do not have a world order as such, but definitely the unipolar world, if we decide to designate it as such right now, this is very, very different from the unipolar moment of, or the unipolar decade of the 1990s. And I think, like it was said in the earlier panel that we were discussing, the whole aspect, because it is being looked upon as a unipolar world because what has happened in Venezuela. But it could have gone wrong. It could have gone wrong what Jimmy Carter tried to do in 1980. If he had succeeded in extricating the hostages from Iran, that would have been a great moment also for the United States. And something could really go wrong as United States goes forward. And the president, Mr. Trump, he tries to flex his muscles, continues to flex his muscles. So this is the subject that I'm going to be speaking about, defense diplomacy. So first, in terms of, I think it needs to be understood that defense diplomacy has really emerged as a key element of Indian foreign policy in terms of projecting its influence while also maintaining its strategic autonomy.
There are, of course, many benefits, many advantages, and I'll very quickly go through them in terms of strengthening strategic partnerships, as is mentioned, in terms of enhancing regional security, particularly as India's interest in the Indo-Pacific has increased. This becomes even more relevant for us. Of course, in terms of when we are talking about exercises, when we are talking about dialogues, defense dialogues that take place with different countries, it strengthens networks of cooperation between different countries, bringing this human element as far as relationships are concerned, building trust, also promoting confidence between different countries, which at the current moment is so very important because we've seen that trust and confidence in each other, that has truly taken a hit as over the last few years, particularly over the last 1 year. And of course, when there are contacts between different militaries, different defense personnel, it also helps to imbibe different practices from other countries. And in terms of modernization of military, through technical, through training processes. Of course, it helps countries to deal with the non-traditional threats, counter-insurgency, counter-terrorism. Those are areas where cooperation can take place. Boost global standing, particularly when we are talking about India as a reliable security provider, when we have these different exercises. I'll speak about it briefly. And of course, a significant component of coercive diplomacy when we are not really talking about kinetic actions to be taken. In terms of the key pillars of India's defense diplomacy, one, of course, military-to-military engagements. In terms of whenever there are visits of chiefs to different countries, we receive visits from other countries to our nation in terms of defense dialogues, in terms of defense agreements that are signed, for instance, with the United States, an important relationship, an important defense partnership. We have the various foundational agreements, whether it is COMCASA, BECA, LIMOA, all these in terms of bringing the two militaries together. Also, I would imagine that in the area of military-to-military engagements, having the defense attaches of different countries posted in our country, having our own defense attaches, and possibly I could mention here in terms of the increased emphasis and focus and attention that India is providing to the area of defense diplomacy, because just a few years ago we had just about 40-45 defense attaches in different countries. And today we have, in 2024, we had another 20-odd defense attaches appointed. In 2026, another 10-15 more defense attaches. So I understand that in 2026 or very soon, we will be having 90 embassies which will also have separate defense wings and defense attaches who will be posted there. So I think this definitely is an indication of the attention that India and the Indian government is putting to it. In terms of military-to-military engagements, of course, there are all these joint exercises that India does with a large number of countries. I have just mentioned a few of them. Yuddhabhyas, that is between the armies of US and India. We just had, notwithstanding the turbulent bilateral relations last year, we had the Yuddhabhyas in Alaska last year. We have COPE India in the area of air exercises, of course, the Malabar exercises in naval, with France, Varuna, Garuda, and Shakti, as the names themselves indicate. Indra, of course, with Russia, in all the three formats. Konkan, Abhay Warrior with the United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. And we also have started having these tri-services exercises, and it'll come as no surprise. We had them first with Russia starting in 2017, then of course with the United States, the Tiger Triumph in 2019. So I think this gives out a very strong feel that India enjoys its strategic autonomy there. Defense exports, industrial cooperation. This is an area again where we have been working, where we have made considerable progress. Humanitarian assistance, HADR also. Capacity building that we undertake training. More than 10,000, 12,000 foreign personnel come to get trained in India in different institutions.
You have 1 minute. Can you wind up?
Sorry?
You have 1 minute.
1 minute to go. Okay. Then I'll finish here, and then maybe we'll have a discussion to go forward. So we have, in terms of infrastructure, we have built in very many countries in terms of equipment, gifting, whether it is to Vietnam, it is to different countries in our neighborhood, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Seychelles, we have gifted to them. In peacekeeping operations also, we have been very active, and that has also promoted confidence between countries. 2+2 dialogues, we started with the United States, and of course we have with all these many countries. Maybe the last slide, then I will limit myself to, is in terms of the major military exercises. They boost combat readiness, enhance interoperability with allies, test new strategies, build diplomatic ties, and there are all these, as far as these are the Malabar exercises, which started in 1992 with the United States. Today we have the Quad countries. They also have this very important strategic signaling that goes out to the countries in the region, in the Indo-Pacific, that we are focused on free and open Indo-Pacific. We have rule of law. That is what we want in this. We have these other exercises, Shakti with France, last year taking place in France. This is with Japan in Mount Fuji, and this is with Sri Lanka, the Maitri Shakti. So I think this is the last one with Russia, that is Indra in, again, Rajasthan happening last year. Let me then finish here, and there are the other elements that I have spoken about, and I'll be very happy to amplify on those. The last point I want to make is that as far as India is concerned, it takes this whole issue of defense diplomacy very seriously across the board, and it is taking steps in expanding its partnership and relations with a large number of countries across the globe, because our exports to many of these countries, our technology transfer arrangements with many of these countries have expanded. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That gives us a broad canvas to see how India's defense diplomacy is going on. Now, what I'll ask in the second round is for each of you to respond to the others from your perspective. So, Harsh, you want to start first? Take about 8 minutes to 10 minutes. Yeah.
Sure. I think empirically, what I was mentioning was largely conceptual and analytical. How do we think about partnerships, and what does it mean in real world? And I think the two presentations have been more empirical, that you look, these are the requirements India has, technology and defense. And it would seem to me that if you start benchmarking partnerships, it is very clear where India's partnerships would go. I mean, technology and defense. It's very unlikely that we are going to have, I mean, we do some military exercises with China, but they're very rudimentary, and they're part of, I think, larger setup. But I think when we look at the sophistication and the quantification of the kind of exercises we do with some of our partners, with the US, for example, it is very clear that we are not living in a multi-aligned environment. We are aligned in a certain way. Similarly, on technology, Mr. Tripathi made very interesting points, because I think that those points are, how do you develop your capacity internally? But the question is, what happens in the interim? Who are our partners in helping us getting those technologies? How do we get to those technologies without losing that space for strategic autonomy? Now, in that context, I think, again, until we become self-reliant, Atmanirbhar, whatever the term we use, how do we think of these partnerships? To say that multi-alignment is going to enhance our strategic autonomy seems to me to be saying nothing, because we are not multi-aligned, and we can't be multi-aligned if your most important strategic challenge is what it is, which is China. Now, if China is your most important strategic challenge, then how do you go about devising your national security strategy that makes certain alignments great? And in that sense, if you remove all the rhetoric, and if you come to the bare bones of our relationships, you would see that we have privileged certain relationships over others in operational terms, which would also mean that in empirical terms, there is a reason why we are doing that, and how we are trying to shape, how we have tried to build those relationships over the last decade or so. So I think my submission would be that we have started using multi-alignment by repeatedly using multi-alignment also at times obfuscates issues. Because if you enter into this space where geopolitical reordering is happening, where geopolitical fault lines are sharpening, and where you're an important partner, or where the most important, Nitin, as you mentioned, is we are still living in the world where America's overhang is everywhere. If that partner starts demanding certain outcomes, then how do we make our choices? And therefore, I ended by saying that those choices, we should be prepared that certain choices will have to be made. I'm not so sure that intellectually we are prepared for it, because I think there is still a lot of conversations happen which are neither here nor there. We still tiptoe around the main issue as to how do we build internal capacity over the long term by taking certain partnerships more seriously. Of course, partnerships by definition are a binary. I mean, they are true track engagement. We can believe in a partnership, the other side may not, and the other side will come to us with a larger reality of how they perceive this part and how they want to go. So how do we stand up to those that are asking us to make certain choices? But what are our choices? I think that's essentially the question, which is often gets obfuscated, because we say that, look, we do defense diplomacy, and here are the list of countries that we do defense diplomacy with. I think there was recently a very interesting question that was posed to MEA about why India is not part of a BRICS, a military exercise, because there was a certain exercise going on, and I think that the argument there is pretty obvious, but that has to be made in a way that also allows us to link up with our internal deliberations that are happening in this country as to where is the consensus in this country insofar as our certain relationships are concerned. And that fundamentally to me is essentially going to be the question for us as a strategic community to think about, because we are going to live in this period for a while. This period is not going to, whether Mr. Trump or no Mr. Trump, there is going to be an America or the geopolitical contestation which is only going to sharpen. So what are our choices? Are we clear about those choices? I think using multi-alignment repeatedly obfuscates more than it sort of reveals.
Thanks, Harsh. I think I want to connect what you're saying to what the Air Chief said this morning. And I think he put it very subtly, that as much as you're chasing a vision of Atmanirbharta or complete self-reliance on platforms, you have the problem of the here and the now. And if you are dependent on somebody to service your needs for the here and the now, then the talk of multi-alignment, etc., is sort of vaporware, right? Because you still need an important relationship which you have with certain partners, or let's call them important relationships you have with certain partners, which service your here and the now. I think the challenge for us has always been that the short-term the short-term shots which comes into your body have been the enemies of your long-term well-being, right? And that's probably the dilemma which we have to solve. Maybe that's also a technology sovereignty question. Does technology, you might want to respond to the rest, but my question to you would be, how easy and how long will it take for us to be meaningfully technologically sovereign? But you could respond to the others first. Mine's the last question.
But yours is the easiest question. As I said, it might have come as a surprise to all. We are the 4th largest forex reserve in the world. The faster and quicker we open our purse strings, we can have technology sovereignty in many sectors. As I said, no country in the world today is 360 degrees completely sovereign as far as technologies are concerned. Even the Americans are buying uranium from Russia. So there are a lot of technologies which are unique, but partnerships can be built as the multipolar reliances and alliances that we were talking about, we can build, and that can also speed up the process. So we build a moat around ourselves as for the technologies that we need. Right now, in many countries, those technologies are available. I'll give another example. Last year, Tata's bought Iveco commercial truck business for $4.5 billion. The Iveco defense truck business was also up for sale for 1/3 the price of $1.5 billion. We didn't buy it. Why? Because from a private equity perspective, we don't have the infrastructure. SEBI and RBI have a restriction that on an annual basis, financial year basis, only $1.5 billion US can have an outflow from the country. So we need to change all these things because now we have come of age. In many cases, our restrictions from financial services are still very restrictive and are keeping our hands tied behind our back. So once we open those, we can actually speed up this process much faster. We have been struggling with Kaveri engine, but as I showed you, in 2022, you could have had the whole of ITP Aero for 1.7 billion euros. That's pittance in comparison to what we have spent over the past 40 years. Answers your question?
Yeah, so just to take you a little deeper into this, does technological sovereignty mean that you have access to that technology no matter where it's in the world, or does it have to be on the sovereign territory of India?
That's a very good question. When you look at technology transfers, there are more sophisticated ways of doing technology transfer today than just doing transfer of manufacturing DRDO style and call it technology transfer. What we are doing is we send a bunch of guys over, they learn which screws to be turned in which way and bring back. If that was true technology transfer, then after the transfer that we got for anything, Sukhoi Su-30, we should have been able to make Sukhoi 31, but we didn't. So we need to be able to do technology transfers where even the tacit knowledge of that technology is with us. And right now, having that technology means the engineering staff knows what to do. So whether we mobilize it internationally, there are multinationals all over the world which are doing the work. Google and all of them have GCCs in India. We are struggling with GTRE, but top jet engine makers have all offices in Bangalore, straight across the street. So people can leave GTRE and join GE, but GE cannot, senior vice president can't be brought into GTRE. So these are the structures that we have put in place that we need to actually take care of. Whether technology is in India or abroad is not that big an issue.
So fantastic conversation, but I'll pause this for a while and then we'll go on. We'll come back to it. Ambassador Sajjanhar, would you like to respond to the two gentlemen? Well, or if you want, you could respond first, and then if you have some other slides, you can do them later. It's up to you.
Thank you very much. Let me make a few comments, if you permit, Nitin. And, the first that I would like to say about, the discussion that we are having on multi-alignment. We use multi-alignment, we use strategic autonomy, etc. The way I look upon it is that multi-alignment and strategic autonomy are two sides of the same coin. And basically in terms of, you might say that, and like it was mentioned in terms of technological sovereignty, there cannot be 100%, in terms of a multi-alignment or 100% strategic autonomy under any circumstances. And basically it will depend how you perceive your national interest. That of course takes precedence over anything else, any matters of principle or whatever, and how much you are able to, depending upon which partner you are working with. The other aspect possibly I could mention here is that multi-alignment at times, and this I saw that this was being conflated with transactionalism. And I think this is something that we need to particularly be mindful of and debunk this particular notion. In fact, it was mentioned by the Finnish President Alexander Stubb at the United Nations that the countries that are multi-aligned try to follow this multi-alignment policy, they are in, for transactionalism. And nothing could be further from the truth, because transactionalism is a very short-sighted sort of approach that takes, and multi-alignment is a much broader approach that has to be taken. I think in the same view, of course, when India takes over now, India has taken over the presidency of the BRICS. So the challenge will come on that, because whatever is happening around in the world, can these institutions take a particular stand on, for instance, what Mr. Trump has done as far as, let's say, G20. G20 is a grouping of 19 plus 1 countries, 19 plus EU, and now African Union, 19 plus 2. But he has unilaterally and summarily evicted South Africa from that. There has been no consensus, there's been no discussion on that. And maybe just before it took over the presidency at the beginning of December, it might have been a single country that did it. But after that, there has been a meeting of the Sherpas of the G20 that has taken place in the United States. And none of the countries has objected to that, or at least, that is not what any information that seems to have come out. But which means that the whole world, all the G20 countries have agreed to what Mr. Trump has done. So it ceased to be a unilateral one country decision, and it has been multilateralized into all these countries. So the point I'm making is that different countries, it's not that different countries agree with what is being done by Mr. Trump, but definitely it is, they feel that in pursuit of their own national interest, it is maybe to stay quiet at this time. And, there will be a time when they will be able to push back against whatever he's been doing. Maybe the last point that I could mention here is that, particularly when we are talking about technological sovereignty also, we have been very significant importers of defense equipment. In fact, till a few years ago, we were the largest importer. The last CIPRI report seems to suggest that we are the second largest. Ukraine has gone above us, but of course our imports have come down, and India is increasingly manufacturing defense equipment, and its exports are also rising. The point I would like to make is that there are many countries which have used the offset policies very effectively. Countries like South Korea, countries like Brazil, many other countries. And India has unfortunately not been able to do that. So when we are talking about, what has been discussed, what the chief also mentioned in the morning, that we try to get technologies engaged in strategic partnerships. Can the offset policies be worked in such a manner? Because the recent changes that have been made in terms of having a threshold offset of from 300 crores to 2,000 crores, that makes it even more difficult to use the offset policies. Let me stop here.
Okay. I just want to ask one question to the three panelists before I throw it open. And maybe I'll start with Mr. Tripathi. If you recall, in that famous Oval Office scene where Trump is sitting with Zelensky, and he says, "You have no cards," you know, and that's a very sort of an iconic image of the importance of cards in the era of flux that we are in right now. So my question to the three of you would be, what would be the cards that India has at that level with respect to the United States, with respect to China, with respect to Europe? Maybe we'll limit it to these three. What are the cards that we have?
First of all, President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, has his own way of playing. And I still hope that I'll get a visa to go to the US. So I'd prefer not to talk about what he wants to do or what are our cards, also from a national interest perspective of India. In other countries, we have a lot of cards that we can play. And I'll give you a very cogent example from the same perspective. When Mariupol was destroyed, they destroyed a specific industry that was creating a gas called neon. Neon is the most essential ingredient in semiconductor fabrication around the world. 90 to 95% of neon came from Mariupol in the United States. The world over, it's about 75%. Neon is a byproduct of steel making. India is the second largest steel producer. So by default, we produce, and it's a volumes game, so we are the best in producing it at a business viable price. Number one being China, obviously, and people don't want to do business with them. So we could have actually played ourselves to be the neon provider of the world, and if we did, there was no way we could have been out of packed silica. Today, everybody's talking about why, how we should be into packed silica. I've just given you the Brahmastra of how to get in, how to penetrate that Chakravyuh of packed silica. There's no other way you can get neon, but Indian markets have to work in the correct way to start exporting silicon. I've gone and spoken to almost every steel manufacturer in India. And the first thing they said, sir, India में तो market नहीं है. जब होगा तब कर देंगे. जब बड़े साहब का आदेश होगा तब कर देंगे. Everybody has their reasons. That's the answer to your question.
Harsh, what cards do we have?
See, I think India had been playing its cards, whatever they are, very well till Mr. Trump came to office. I mean, you can go back to Trump 1.2 and you can see how effective Indian diplomacy was. And the reason was that the argument that India had been making repeatedly and with some degree of empirical evidence that we are willing to play a role in the Indo-Pacific balance of power, we have the capability to shape that balance of power. So if you want to shape that as well, we can work with you in shaping that. Now, it's not entirely clear to me that Mr. Trump's emphasis on cards is structural. His emphasis on cards is more personal. So I don't know whether there is a way in which we can play our cards, we can demonstrate our cards to him that will satisfy him. We know, for example, the whole Operation Sindoor and its aftermath story, and how it also played a role in making him back off. That's what has been reported. Now, if that is the case, then it is also very personal. It is not simply that you can make a structural or a strategic argument and you would win over him. So I think that turbulence that you have is both personal as well as structural. He may also believe that, look, strategically, and I don't know, but there were many who in the initial months of his administration were saying that, look, the argument that America in Trump's 2.0 is going to make is that America is going to focus on the Western Hemisphere because that's where they first want to consolidate power, and then the other geographies come. Now, if that is the logic, then I think India has a card to play that we, despite not being an alliance partner of the US, have stood up to the most important challenge that America faces in the region, and without seeking any overt American help. So, in that sense, that's an important card. But whether that satisfies him is another question. Particularly, so I think that turbulence is going to be with us, for a while. And just one point that I want to make is that, I think the last Ambassador Sajjanhar's point on, and I think you mentioned about what the Air Chief was saying in the morning about India, about India's sort of trying to structure partnerships to get to acquire capabilities, right? Now, I think if there is one area where we should be very careful in terms of defense acquisitions and multi-alignment, it is defense. Because ultimately, how do you bring those capabilities together to make a whole? If we continue to buy off the shelf without any strategic logic to our national security and foreign policy, then we will become like a Humpty Dumpty, and I think it will be very difficult to put it back together. So I do think that there is particularly on defense and multi-alignment, there is a lot to think about.
Ambassador Sajjanhar, what cards do we have? After this, the audience you can prepare your questions, so I'll come to you.
In my opinion, I think we have a large number of cards. You mentioned these three countries, USA, Europe region, and China, right? Leaving aside China, because I think both USA and Europe, all of them would be looking for big markets. And Europe definitely is looking for a China +1 diversification from there. There is, I think our big card is our political stability. There are very few countries around. You see so much of turmoil, you see so much of volatility around. There has been political stability in India. In terms of the market, some people might scoff at it, that it is, the American economy is 28, 30 trillion. The Chinese is 18 trillion, and we are 4 trillion. But I think the pace at which we are going, we should be above 10 trillion if this is the same pace, and I put that 10 trillion by 2035, we should be a good 30 trillion by 2047. So I think this is a stable market, this is a big market, there is no comparable market. So definitely, this is our market. Then I would say our technological prowess. I will tell you, when I was ambassador in Sweden, we started signing these mobility agreements. Today, we have them with many of these countries. When Mr. Merz was here, what is he looking for? He's looking for techies to come from India to that country. Now, Mr. Trump, because of being under the influence of MAGA, he might sort of, initially both he and Musk were saying that we need H-1B. But after that, they have started vilifying all this. I think the United States has been able, maybe that might be a little bit of an exaggeration, but not all that much, has been able to get its dominance, global dominance in technological matters as a result of many of these, technological people who have gone from here. They are sort of, heading all those big companies. There might be some problems with H-1B which need to be set in. So technological prowess is definitely. As far as the Indo-Pacific is concerned, I would tend to agree with what Harsh has said. You see, he says Western Hemisphere, that is where I want to be predominant, etc. But that doesn't mean that I am going out of Indo-Pacific. That if I am strong enough in my own hemisphere, that will give me greater capabilities to be able to have, to ensure peace and security and stability also in the Indo-Pacific. So right now, he might be wanting to go ahead with China as far as, treat it only as an economic competitor and not as a strategic competitor as he had done earlier. But I think definitely on that score also, and if not for the United States, definitely for Europe as far as peace in Indo-Pacific is concerned. Definitely that is, because we are not an ally, we are a partner. We are taking care of all our defense, concerns. And maybe the last point that I could make here is even in the area of defense exports, we are doing, of course, the base was very, very small, but still it is, we have about $3 billion of exports last year. By 2029, we want to have about $6 billion. I think we are in that exports going up, imports coming down. So I think we are becoming increasingly self-sufficient in that.
Thank you. Questions? I'll recognize the gentleman here and the gentleman at the back, and then I'll come to the right wing a little later.
Thank you very much. Very thought-provoking deliberations. I'm Group Captain Narang from MPIDSA. First to Mr. Anshuman. Why Indian private sector entities have not been doing reverse engineering in many, not only military, even rather civil military technological domains, as per you, and what would be your advice to Indian public sector entities? So, and second question is about sovereign fund. What should be the size of kind of takeovers you are suggesting, and how do we manage? And you know, we don't give small money and it doesn't. What is the type of funds we can actually make such takeovers possible? And the third question is when not to go for collaboration, because a lot of collaboration impact your indigenous industry. So how is that defining point to go for tech sovereignty and go for collaboration? Answer one to you.
No, I think 3 is enough.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All yours.
Thank you, Group Captain Narang. Those are pertinent questions. We in India, many people are not aware of the legal procedures that allow you to do reverse engineering. As I said, for many it's a taboo subject. People don't understand. But it is not a taboo subject when you come out of the defense sector and go into pharmaceuticals. People understand what it is. So then people say, okay, yes, it might be legal and you might be allowed, but I have a contract. Well, then contracts can be negotiated correctly and appropriately to allow for those things to happen. Even those who are giving you the equipment are very well aware that these things would happen. For example, everybody knows China copies, but the world is still doing business with China. Russian jets, Su-27s, were copied left, right, and center by the Chinese, and the Chinese even reneged on the contract after buying 3 jets. What was the final outcome? The Russians and the Chinese negotiated, okay, you buy a bunch of them so that we can recuperate our research costs. So there are, we need to educate, and our colleges need to have a department of reverse engineering and teach them. If you go on Amazon.in today and just write reverse engineering, look at the amount of books which will show up in every sector, from jet engines to software to hardware to plastic molding, every area. So the actual size of this technology is very deep, and India is not really in cash and exploited it. Second part, you talked about the sovereign wealth funds and what should be the size. That's a very important point, because today we have about $500 billion of money, which in a family parlance would be saying is sitting in a savings account or a current account. We are not investing into an SIP. If we are allowed to have a sovereign wealth fund, we can actually make that dollar or that foreign exchange earn interest for us. So by a rule of thumb, I would say around a $10–20 billion would be a good amount of asset under management that we can start with. From my experience, having been in the private equity world, being on the board of State Bank of India, subsidiary on private equity, I think it's a very doable game to have $10–20 billion. Even the semiconductor mandate that we started with at ISM was $10 billion. So 10 to 20 is an easy game to start with, and it will be looking at the sizes of the acquisitions, 1.5 billion, 1.7 are outliers. Many of the things can be bought much cheaper. Now, on the last part on where we should not do business, when the Soviet Union fell, one of the prized possessions the US wanted was a technology to do thrust vectoring. If you go to NASA's website, they actually show and have a web page stating that they went and contracted with the company that made thrust vectoring in the former Soviet Union. They gave them a contract to come and do that for the US. And eventually, thrust vectoring came into F-22s and everywhere. So, technologies which are so securely intrinsic to your country should be kept away from doing it. Now, it was unfortunate the economic climate was such that they needed money, and they would, I'm sure that if they had gone on, thrust vectoring would have not gone into the other people's hands. Similarly, B-2 bombers, the technologies, stealth technology was made by Nausher Gavadia, a guy from Mumbai. And he then went on to open a consulting firm, and his consulting services were used by other countries. So when we are providing that kind of staff post-superannuation, there could be restrictions on which countries you can work with and which countries you can't. That should answer your question.
The gentleman.
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Captain Vikramaditya. I'm from the National Maritime Foundation. Now, Professor Prant brought out that China is our biggest strategic challenge. I mean, there's no argument with that. Our entire strategic framework is obsessed with China. Now, in the same breath, the US has obviously been our most important strategic partner over the past 2 decades. Now, to be realistic, the US is no longer, at this moment in time, it is no longer a strategic partner. And in my opinion, it would be delusional to think that it will again become a strategic partner, even in the medium term. I personally feel that we are at war with the US, and the US is using every instrument of warfare other than kinetic warfare against India. So some of the dependencies that we've created, especially with the Air Force and the Navy, they will come back to bite us. So shouldn't we start thinking of China in a different breath? Now, I would like you to elaborate on that. Shouldn't we start working on our relationship with China? Shouldn't we start endeavoring some kind of a partnership with China in terms of technology, in terms of investment, and in terms of sorting our relationship out? Just to comment on the cards that we have.
Let him answer this, because it's a big, profound question. I think he needs some time to answer this.
I really have no profound answer to this. See, I think what you are saying would also have been conventional wisdom in 1970s. If we were sitting in a similar environment, someone in the audience would have said exactly the same thing. That America is, if you recall, in the 1971 war and how we fought. We fought against and at that point in time, US, China, and Pakistan were together. So the point is not that who are your enemies and who are your adversaries. I think the point is how do you calibrate the external environment to your advantage. And under the present circumstance, and of course the logic or the engagement with China argument has been there with us for a very long time. After all, that has been our professed policy. The peace and tranquility along the border agreement, it basically stipulated that if you can have peace at the border, then we can work out our arrangements. We can work with China on economics and trade and technology and people-to-people ties. And that had been the argument. So, so I don't think that that this argument has not been part of our discourse, or that that having a forward-looking, more productive relationship with China had not been part of the discourse. The problem is, as you were mentioning with regard to the US, foreign policy is a two-way street. It is also about, it is not simply as to what we do to others. What others do to you is also important. So China has repeatedly done things to us which make it very difficult to have that normal assumption about the relationship. So far, I don't think there has been any space, China has given us any space to do a lot of things that you are suggesting. After all, if you go back just to 2007, what was India's argument in not operationalizing the Quad? India was saying, along with Australia, that let's not do the Quad. What Abe and Americans at that point were proposing, India said that, look, this is too problematic, Chinese would get annoyed, Chinese would come at us. And so to 2000, we decided not to go down that track. From 2007 to 2017, if you look at the record, China went after India along the border, went after Australia, also creating problems. And by 2017, it were the Indians and the Australians who suggested that let's revive the Quad under Trump administration, first Trump administration. So I think, it is at times a mistake to look at it in a linear manner, and we have to also constantly evolve and adapt. Now, if America is a problem at this point in time, then of course we are pushing back and we are doing what is the best possible arrangement for us. But that, if that would mean, and that has given us an opportunity. China and India are talking to each other after Galwan. There is a rapprochement, and there are opportunities inherent in that rapprochement. Now, whether that rapprochement works, again, it is not simply up to India. That is also China has to make it work as well. So we'll have to wait and watch.
Yeah, let me just take a stab at this, right? Because as I said, this is a profound question, but I think we have to be very clear. Take out romanticism and, anthropomorphism, friends, and look at it from a pure realist lens. India's journey of development requires a partnership with the United States. What Mr. Tripathi was talking about in technological sovereignty, the path to technological sovereignty requires the United States. No country in history has built a semiconductor industry by being on the wrong side of the United States. It includes China, right? Just from that technological point alone, and I'm not talking about defense, I'm talking about technology in general. You cannot do this, or you can do this, probably it'll take you 100 years to do this, but if you want to do it in 2047, you need a positive relationship with the United States. Now, look at China. You could make the same argument to say that we need a positive economic relationship with China in order to accelerate our growth and development story, and you would be right. But strategically, and I think Harsh pointed this out, it is not in China's interests or in their strategic culture to tolerate an India that claims to be a peer. The reason the border dispute remains a dispute is because it's not in China's interest to address it and solve it in terms which are negotiated. Recently, there was a track 2. I think some of you might have come back from that track 2 with the Chinese. And it was very clear in that last session of the Chinese, where the Chinese told our interlocutors that, look, this is your place. You will solve these border disputes. You will solve these trade issues with us, but on our terms, because you don't have the power to be able to solve it on your own, right? And this is what the Chinese are telling you face to face. It's not subtle, right? So I think a realist reading will say that no matter how much of a problem you have with the United States, and relatively speaking, they are, optics apart, they are not serious problems, relatively speaking, you still need to find a positive relationship with the United States, at least for the time being. Until maybe, when they send some troops and say that, Andaman Nicobar Islands belong to us or Lakshadweep belongs to us, unless they make some kind of territorial arguments of that nature. The balance is still, in favor of dealing with the United States. It might not be something which we like, it might not be very pleasant, the optics might not be as nice as we once thought they are, but this is the reality. We'll take some questions from...
Could I add one
yeah, sure.
to this? Just 2 points here. Number one, I think what we also need to realize is that it all started happening after Mr. Trump thought that India is not going to support him for the Nobel Peace Prize. I think let's recognize, even with Norway, he has said, you didn't give me the Nobel Peace Prize, that's why I'm no longer interested in peace, So, it's very much personal. It is not this thing. And also, I think once this goes over. There are sort of some pushbacks either domestically on the economic front, what happens in the midterms, etc. I'm sure there is going to be some realization. The second point, again, exactly as you made, China is sitting on 38,000 square kilometers of our territory in Aksai Chin. It is claiming 93,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh. Whatever else you might say, United States, it's not done any of that. It's not claimed any of those territory. As far as China is concerned, it talks about a multipolar world, but a unipolar Asia, because it doesn't want any country to be equal to it. Now, India's definition of a multipolar world also includes a multipolar Asia. So I think there are a large number of what we also need to see whether this policy of the United States with respect to India, is it related only to Mr. Trump? Is it going to have some dilution after Mr. Trump goes? Or I think that is a subject of discussion that we need to have. But also that barring the issue of trade and H-1B, many of the other portfolios in the India-US stack, they are proceeding forward. We have extended the 10-year defense agreement. I spoke about, this Yuddhabhyas and others, visits of delegations, they are taking place. So I think there is that aspect of the MAGA crowd that is, really hyping up this whole issue. How long it is going to last, let's wait and see. And that is what I think the strategy of the government so far has been.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Group Captain Datta Gupta from Headquarter IDS. I just wanted to have your opinion, while, especially from Mr. Pai and Professor Pant, while we talked about the Monroe Doctrine or the Monroe Doctrine as it is called now, is it feasible that US wants to limit itself towards the Western Hemisphere so that the competing powers in the Eastern Hemisphere get into some sort of a conflict so that it diminishes each of their powers by a certain level. And thereafter, what Kautilya termed as, it maintains that Udayasana, and thereafter gets into Madhyama again towards the Eastern Hemisphere. And is it, for India, is it, will it be correct to right now maintain peace and tranquility or hide and bide in asana rather than going into the yana form and trying to call itself the national net security provider or something like that, and while doing hide and bide use all the methods that have been brought out by Mr. Tripathi of Samadam, Bhed, not going into Dand yet, and thereafter when the time comes to emerge as the power, rather than trying to show itself as a dominant power right now. Thank you, sir.
I think certainly, what you're saying, there's a lot of logical sense there. And if you think of this standard international relations theoretical models, also you will have Mearsheimer-like arrangement, like let's dominate our Western Hemisphere and let the balance of power play out elsewhere. So that the only role America has is as an offshore balancer. Let them play it out, and we will look at it from here. And when we are required, we'll go and shape the balance. So I think there is certainly an element of there's something to that to what you are arguing. I think the only issue there is from India's perspective is that if America is not part of the game in the Indo-Pacific, then India inevitably gets drawn into this wider space because you have increasingly, as part of the wider Indo-Pacific, there is an argument to be made about, we are talking, this panel is about partnerships. Now, if you have your close partners, Japan, Australia, some of the Southeast Asian countries like Vietnam or Philippines or Indonesia, if they get sucked up into a crisis with China, what is going to be a response when America is not there? Or over a period of time, if you think of eventually the possibilities that Taiwan, for example, gets taken over by the Chinese, then what is left? In some ways, the dominance of China becomes so acute, then I think geopolitically it becomes a very difficult environment for India to operate in any case, whether or not India is part of that conflict or not. So I think even if India limits itself to its, and says that we are not interested in conflict or wider contestation amongst the regional powers, I think the space that India will occupy will become increasingly contested in any case, even if America is not there. And India, I think, will have India, in my opinion, will have difficulty in achieving the agenda that it wants, which is to keep the focus on its developmental priorities, which is, after all, why it wants a stable and peaceful Indo-Pacific. It will not be a peaceful and a stable Indo-Pacific, and it will have costs for India's internal development as well. So I don't think India will be able to keep itself away from it. So in that sense also, from India's vantage point, it makes sense to have America in the Indo-Pacific, because America, by its sheer force, balances out a lot of these actors, which allows for a certain degree of stability in the region, because in its absence, there might be greater instability. And while we may work out an arrangement with the Chinese that, look, let's have peace at the border, but again, it is contingent on their largesse, their benevolence, because we, if you look at the border, even at the border, we are at a disadvantage. So balance of power is favoring them, not us. So clearly at a number of levels, we may want an America rather than not want an America, in my opinion.
I just want to say that, the idea of being a net security provider was connected to a world order which doesn't exist anymore. So it made sense for us to say that we want to be a net security provider in a world where there was liberal international order and so on and so forth. In the world of the future, I think we have to ask ourselves and have that internal conversation, do we really want to be a net security provider in a world which is in flux? One last question and then we can... Okay, I saw him first, but I heard you first, so I don't know. Why don't you choose then?
Have both.
No, I think we can take only one, yeah. Yeah.
Good afternoon. Vice Admiral Mahendru here, retired. A comment on what Mr. Tripathi spoke about on technological sovereignty, especially in the defense region, if I may, and then seek your views on that. I think the road that we've taken to achieve technical sovereignty, I think we're going nowhere. And if you said 2047, we're going to hit that target, I think we are miles away from that. And the reason why I say that, in a way, is that we haven't understood the mechanics of defense technology. Firstly, no one transfers technology to you. No country has ever done that. We've been following the history of defense technology. No technology is given to another country in the field of defense, at least if it is contemporary, if not leading edge technology. No one gives it to you. Very few examples of successful defense transfer of technologies happens, whatever. Even if it happens, it has to be absorbed.
Could you keep it shorter? Because I want to close it exactly at 1:30.
We'll do that. So even if it happens, it has to be absorbed. We cannot absorb, we don't have the mechanisms to absorb technology. We just don't have it. We have no academia in that business. It is just not a matter of getting technology on paper, but you have to absorb it and then make it grow from that baseline, from that benchmark. We don't have that. The industry is missing. We try to get DRDO to absorb technology or PSUs to absorb technology. The wrong route again, because they have no incentive to grow it, to make it to the next level. And therefore, to my mind, we will continue on this trap. We've done bits and pieces like IDEX, 2 crore, 10 crore, doesn't create defense technology. Not at all. So I would just like your comments on that.
Thank you, Admiral Saab. Great question. And just to clarify, I didn't ask him to ask this question because he just gave me an opportunity to give a 6 straight on that ball. We don't buy technology, we buy the company. When we buy the company, the technology comes with its own. If tomorrow we go and buy ITP Aero, we've got the engineers, we got the staff, we got everyone. For example, India bought Ashok Leland, we bought Leland. Tata's bought JLR. And after that, their own automobile infrastructure and production improved substantially. So there's cross-pollination, and yes, sir, you are absolutely right. We need to improve there's a business term that I'd like to bring in here, and I gave a big lecture at the Naval War College on that, called absorptive capacity. We have to increase our absorptive capacity. We can't continue like the Newton's first law. We have a bureaucratic first law called to continue in the state of rest or in uniform motion until acted upon by an outside force. So if we don't have that outside force coming into the picture, it will not happen. But now I think things are changing because there's a big flux in the market. Secondly, right now with what's going on, the Dow Jones fell yesterday because of the remarks made from the American side to Europe yesterday night. So if today Dow Jones falls, there's instability in the market. That instability can actually be very favorable for us to go and leverage a sovereign wealth fund through a private equity entities into buying subsequent amounts of technologies in the international companies in the international market which have the key technologies that we need. So we are reaching a very good stage. We have an opportunity that we should use it. But as you rightly said, we need to improve our absorptive capacity and move out of the bureaucratic first law. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 13:30. Just want to make one concluding comment because it's important. I don't think flux and uncertainty is bad for India. As much as you would read the international press and you see fear, uncertainty, and doubt, anxiety around the world, established powers like the United States wondering whether, or Europe wondering whether this is good for us or not. For India, flux is an opportunity. The ability to change the world, change world order, and shape the new world order in a way that is more consistent with our interests as opposed to the victors of the Second World War's interests is there right in front of us. So I think we should approach this flux and uncertainty with confidence and with caution and confidence, and not with a level of anxiety and fear, because objectively there is no space, there is no need for us to be anxious and fearful as we used to be even 25 years ago. On that note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thanks for the panelists for putting up with exactitude in time. We had a good session today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair and panelists, for such an informative session. May I now request Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary, PVSM, AVSM VM, former Chief of the Air Staff, to kindly come up on the stage and felicitate our guests with token of appreciation. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a round of applause for such a mesmerizing session. So we'll have a group photograph. May I also request Air Vice Marshal Anil Golani, DG Caps, to come up on the stage for the group photograph. With this, we come to the end of session 2. I now request DG Caps to give the closing remarks.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think at the outset, what I'd like to say is that if Air Marshal Subroto Mukerjee would have been listening to all this, he would have he'll be very happy to see the discussion that and the debate that we've had, which kept us engrossed through the day. I'm in no position or condition to sum up what has happened today, because I know that I stand between you all and lunch. But a couple of points I'll make. I think starting from what Chief said is that, as a nation, we need to be militarily strong. There is no doubt, or there's no denying the fact, as also the fact that we must not rest on our past laurels and look at what is going to come in the future and then act accordingly. I think the point in the end, which Nitin made, that this the world of flux is an opportunity that India must capitalize on, and I think India as a nation does have a lot of cards to play, and the cards that we play with different actors need to be played at an opportune moment. And I think when we look at US and Trump, whether this relationship with the US structurally or personally with Trump, I believe it is different, and I think the structural partnership is here to stay, and it would pay us dividends in the long term. And I think India has a lot of advantages in terms of its democracy, demography, intellectual capital, and the market access and everything. And I think that is going to give us the dividend in times to come, provided we play our cards properly. In the end, I just like to thank all the speakers, the panelists and the chairs for taking time out and coming here and, doing this so well. And also ADG and Group Captain Naik and the team which put all this together and, made this happen. I'd urge you all to visit our website, Center for Aerospace Power and Strategic Studies, and have a look at the work that we do. Follow us on Twitter and YouTube and all. And we'd like to get more feedback, hear from you, so that we enrich our discussions and participate in such seminars while we do that in the future. Thank you very much. Join us for lunch, and Jai Hind.